6 write-in votes for budget, and somebody else got 7, so she didn't get the seat.
Oh.
Good evening, everybody. This is the Goffstown Planning Board. Today is Thursday. It is, what day is it? March 12th. Tomorrow is Friday the 13th. We have regularly scheduled business. We have some items of correspondence, and we will take things up as posted and in the usual course of our business. Before we do anything today, I'm going to ask everybody to introduce themselves. Joanne, can we start with you?
Joanne Duffy, Planning and Economic Development Director.
David Pierce, I'm an alternate member.
Peter Georgantis, Selectmen's Rep.
Gayla Breck, I'm an alternate and also the recording secretary.
My name is Barbara Griffin.
Philip Devanza.
Tim Redmond.
Jim Raymond.
Thank you, everybody. We had an election this week. Phil and Jim re-ran and were re-elected. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for running again, and thank you very much for getting elected.
Over tough opposition on you.
Yeah, you ran wonderful campaigns. It was not a contested slot, just
I
for
still
people
have
who are
signs at
wondering.
my house.
But they will be re-sworn in for their new term after the recount period has expired. So that will occur between now and the next meeting. They are sitting here perfectly legal to continue on with our business tonight. Our first item of business tonight, which is our usual item, is approval of the minutes of our prior meeting. That would be the meeting of February 27th. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the minutes of the meeting of February 27th. Does anybody have any corrections? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining.
I'm abstaining.
I was away.
So 3 abstainings.
Are you appointing the alternates?
For this vote?
Tonight.
Okay.
I didn't do it before the vote. I'm not going to do that afterwards. We have information in our packet in regards to some of the projects that we're hearing tonight, which we will address when we get to those. So we will go right into, we only have new business tonight. Our first item of new business is a conditional use permit hearing to allow a second driveway on a lot that does not meet the 250-foot frontage requirement that allows for a second driveway per section 742 of the Goffstown zoning ordinance. The applicant has 226 feet of frontage. The property is owned by Timothy and Katrina Witten and the 9 Revocable Trust and Kimberly M. And this is located at 260 Kimberly Hill Road. It is zoned agricultural. Joanne, is this application is complete?
Yes, it is.
And is there any regional impact?
No, there's none.
Can I have a motion?
Motion to
Accept the application?
accept the application as complete and ready for review with no regional impact.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Carries. We are down 2 members, so I can appoint 2 voting members after having said I will do it. So for future votes, both David and Gail will be voting members, unless for whatever the application is you feel you should recuse yourself or not vote. We have a quorum without the appointment of alternates. Joanne, why don't you tell us what we're looking at?
So the applicant lives on Kennedy Hill Road, and they would like to add another driveway cut for the purpose of storing their RV. They're not able to get around to the back, so they just wanted to store it on the side of their property, but in order to do that, they need the second driveway.
And I understood the application to also say it would give access to their leach field for their septic system, is that right?
Yes.
All right.
They're seeking a conditional use permit, and you should all have copies of the application
Right.
where they've completed the answers to the criteria.
Yep. All right, and did staff have any comments?
No. Actually, none of the departments had any comments at all.
All right, so let me, Sarah, you're here?
Good.
We didn't have any comments, but
So sightlines are okay, there's no issues with the entrance? Okay. All right.
The
at
only,
the-
yeah,
go
say
ahead.
one thing. The only thing they will need, if the board approves this, they still will need to go through the process of obtaining a driveway permit.
Right. Okay. Well, I sort of assumed that. All right. Does anybody have any questions before we hear from the applicant? Who probably doesn't have to say too much at this point? Seeing none? The applicant want to come on down to the chair here and introduce himself and confirm that we have a good understanding of what you're trying to do.
Yes. My name's Tim Witten, 260 Kennedy Hill Road.
Okay. And you're requesting a conditional use permit for purposes of a second driveway?
Yes.
All right, and so you understand, and do I understand the proposed driveway is for the purposes of parking an RV and access to septic leach field?
Yes.
So this isn't intended to be a, create a cul-de-sac around the back,
No.
a circular driveway around the back of your house? Okay. And has DPW talked to you about the driveway permit application, or?
Yes.
Okay, so you're familiar with what
Yep.
Ms. Duffy referred to? Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to tell us about this project?
I don't think so. Unless any of you have a question.
All right, do you have your application in, for Joanne, do you have a copy of the application, or somebody
I
scooted down?
have the original. Do you want to borrow it?
And the reason I'm asking you to do that is because before we go into the public hearing, I'm gonna ask you to tell us, oh, we have an extra one. Do you need one, Joanne? You're all set?
That's okay.
All right,
I can share here.
all right. If you can find your, does she have it open to the conditional use
Questions?
questions? All right, if for the record, you could go through with us what the question is and what your answer is and why.
Yes. Sure.
And you can just refer to it as ABC rather than
You want me
154141.
to
Yeah,
read the
just go
question?
through them all, starting with A.
Okay. The use is specifically authorized in the ordinance as a conditional use.
And it is?
Yes.
And Joanne, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
If completed as proposed by the applicant, the development in its proposed location will comply with all requirements of this section and with the specific conditions or standards established in this ordinance for the particular use. And I put yes.
Okay, and Joanne, that's correct, based on your review? All right, C?
The use will be compatible with the neighborhood and with adjoining or abutting uses in the area in which it is to be located.
Okay, so why don't you explain what the use is going to be?
This is for a second driveway and will also be used to service the septic and parking for an RV.
And this is intended to be a dead-end driveway?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And how about D?
The use will not have a substantial adverse impact on vehicular or pedestrian safety. And this driveway is only for occasional use,
Okay.
times a year. E, the use will not have a substantial adverse impact on the appearance and visual quality of the surrounding neighborhood. In evaluating visual impact, the planning board may consider architectural and design elements.
Is your driveway going to be sparkly? I'm only kidding. I'm only kidding.
It'll look wonderful.
All right. Okay, and and what have you told us in your application?
The driveway is being installed by professionals, not me, and will look as such when it's completed.
Okay, thank you. And then F?
F, the use will be adequately serviced by necessary public utilities and by community facilities and services of a sufficient capacity to ensure the proper operation of the proposed use.
All right.
And this is just a second driveway for a single-family residence, so no additional services will be required.
Great, thank you. Does the board have any questions before I open up for public hearing? Tim?
So Joanne, I'm going to ask you this question. We have the large map that's in there, and then we have in the packet, we have a map of the overhead view of all the lots off of Kennedy Hill Road.
The GIS map.
I guess that's what it is. So, the map the large map shows the house in the middle of the lot. You look at the GIS map, and it's very confusing to show that map shows that two houses are on the same lot.
Yeah, the GIS lines are not correct, and they're worse in some parts of the town versus other sections. So you can't really go by those lines because this is not surveyed.
So my question is that how can we tell how close this application for this RV parking is in relation to the neighbor's home?
Well, if you look at the plan that they've submitted,
Yeah,
Bill, oh, you want to know where the neighbor's home
yeah, because
is.
we have to consider the neighbors as well as the applicant.
May I ask a question?
David?
Tim, what's the offset from your boundary line shown on this graphic to the, your new driveway?
10 feet or more.
Thank you.
Well, that's not my question. My question is how close to the neighbor's house will this be if we approve this conditional use permit?
Just wanted to set back first.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you unless
Well,
I
that's
went
the
out there
requirement,
and
yeah.
looked at it.
The 10-foot setback is a requirement.
10-foot setback is a requirement, so would,
It looks like,
and that's shown on the diagram. It says 10 feet right there on the first.
this is 62.8. So it looks like the lines would shift down.
So,
Why don't we ask the applicant? Looking at your house.
Yep.
The house to the left of where this driveway, on the side of your lot,
Yes.
where is the house situated on that lot? Do you have any idea? Just, can you estimate? Is it
I
close?
don't, it's not.
It's not 10 feet.
No, it's set back a little bit, maybe 30 feet, 40 feet from her property line.
From her property
Yep.
line on the side.
okay. Well, I'll just wait to see if anybody's here to speak to this before I pursue it.
All right, and how big is your lot?
2 acres.
2.2
2 acres, right? This is agricultural zone, so these lots are all at least 2 acres.
Yep.
Okay. All right, anybody have any questions before I ask the gentleman to take a seat and open this up to public hearing? All right, seeing none, thank you, sir. All right, at this time, I will open the public hearing. This is a public hearing in regards to tax map 2, lot number 62-8. This is in the agricultural zone on Kennedy Hill Road. The applicant is requesting a conditional use permit to put in a second driveway. Is there anybody here to speak in regards to this application? Any butters, anybody else from town here to speak? I'm seeing no one, so I'm going to close the public hearing. Joanne, were all the abutters notified as required?
Yes, they were.
All right. Okay. Board members, it does not appear to me that there are any outstanding issues in this. Do any board members have any outstanding issues that I have not heard? I'm not seeing any. I believe the applicant has adequately addressed the conditional use permit, which Gail has gotten into the minutes. Is there a motion?
Well,
Tim?
I'm like to bring my topic back up. I'm concerned that we would grant a conditional use permit for someone to park a motorhome without requiring any type of neighborly protection so that they don't have to sit there and look at it 10 feet from the property line. If this was proposed to be farther into the lot or maybe off of the back of the existing driveway behind the house, that's one thing, but for me to approve, to be asked to be approved a conditional use permit which parks a motorhome right on someone's property line, I'd like to know where the other house is, so I can make a decision. Now, I understand the neighbor's not here to speak to it, which doesn't say they're for it or against it.
Thank you. Phil?
I have a question for Joanne. If this property had 24 feet more frontage, would the applicant need to be here?
No.
You could just go get the driveway application to Public Works, fill it out, and put the driveway where it is.
Correct.
And there's no issues with the visibility on the road that Public Works has.
No, there's no issue.
Okay, so
It's a straight road.
okay, thank you. I don't, I understand the concern, but I don't think that it's actually an issue, because 24 feet, he wouldn't have to be here.
Well, I might point out that we just had a zoning ordinance vote on an article that addressed the parking of RVs, that essentially left it very permissible as to where you can park an RV on a lot, so I'm not sure what standing we would have to require screening, even if we determined it was an issue. Other board members?
I'm gonna pull up a Google map so that you can take a look at it. It's tiny,
Doesn't
but
really matter what the map says, like, I agree with what Phil said. If that 24 feet was on the other side, opposite from where the motorhome was, it would still be allowed. So it really doesn't make a difference which side it's on, because it still would be allowed, even if it had the extra 25 feet, it would be that close to that house.
do you want me to pass this around?
No, I don't need to see it.
It's quite a distance.
Well, to go to that argument, then, that if the lots were 24 feet wider, then that would add extra footage for people to be farther away from it. So that goes both ways. The extra,
Not
the extra.
necessarily. That 24 feet could be on the other side, Tim, and you'd still have the same amount of setback between those two houses on that side.
I would have liked to have seen the other house.
Do you want to see this? It shows the other house.
I'm fine.
I would like to see it. Pass down Joanne's phone. No, Joanne, you don't have to get it. Just don't, nobody touch any buttons on it, because once the phone gets in my hand, it goes to something, whatever.
And it's clean, I just washed it off.
All right, well. yeah.
Disinfected
Is there
it?
a Lysol disinfectant?
With Lysol.
So let me ask you, when I'm looking at a fair amount of trees, it looks like, in the area that you're coming in, is that right?
Yes, I did take a picture before I came here, looking down where the driveway will be.
So are there going to be any trees left after you take the,
Yeah, everything that is coming down is taken down in this picture, if you want to see it.
all right, why don't you pass it down, starting that way?
I don't,
Well, I'd like to see it.
You can have it.
It got raised as an issue, I'm going to see it.
there's no leaves on the
This-
trees
this
right
is
now.
the
It's a little bit of a
driveway.
moot point.
The house is
I understand that, but it's,
Okay, so these are trees on your
Huh?
land?
Yep.
My
Why
puppy
don't you
chewed
just,
my
let
phone.
Tim just walk around with this, so
All
I'm
right.
not touching his phone and screwing it
oh,
up.
that's true.
Well, I don't wanna mess up your phone and push the wrong,
So
I'm like,
this is the neighbor's house. It is just out of view. It's not in the picture, but
Okay.
there are still trees.
Okay, thank you.
If it helps too, it's a 30-foot travel trailer, not a motorhome too. so.
Okay.
This is
These are all
looking
the
down.
trees that
Yep.
will remain?
Yes,
Okay.
everything that's clear,
Right, okay.
everything that's standing is standing.
Because
All right, so you've already done the clearing.
Yes, because I need the leach field replaced, so they have to come in there.
Oh.
This is what
another-
initiated the whole process.
Okay. You can step on that, don't worry about it.
This is looking down the driveway, proposed driveway.
84
The
feet.
neighbor's house is over here. This is my house.
Like more than the length of the house.
Okay.
The length of
Yeah.
the house.
Those houses haven't been there that long to need a leach field replaced, have they? Oh, Lord. Yes.
I actually have one thing to add for the distance.
Okay.
It actually started with a driveway permit, so Eric went and investigated and then forwarded in here. And so Eric did check the location of the second driveway. There are at least 40 feet per the requirement of like his driveway being adjacent to his neighbor's driveway. And from this picture, it looks like the neighbor's driveway is closer to his house than the house. So if there's 40 feet between their driveway and his, then there's at least 40 feet between where he's gonna park and the house.
Okay. Or 30 feet, because he's got a 10-foot setback. Okay. All right. Is there any further discussion by board members? Is anybody willing to make a motion on this?
I move that we find that the applicant made make the findings in section 15.4.1.4, which is Tim told us about, and that we grant the conditional use permit for a RV parking and for the second driveway, for use for RV parking and access to the septic system, but not for further development of the lot.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
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 Opposed? Passes unanimously. You're all set. thank you for coming. So you will deal with getting a driveway permit and what we need to do for that.
Yeah, I've already filled it out, so you're just waiting on this meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, the second item of business tonight is a completeness review, site plan review hearing for a proposal to add commercial ground-mounted solar arrays to lots 47-1. These are all lots 47, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. This proposal is to add commercial ground-mounted solar arrays to those lots. There will be, it's also proposed a voluntary lot merger, merging the lots into 3 separate lots. The property is located off Shirley Hill Road, Route 114. The property owners are Gentle Slopes Land Development LLC, and the applicant is GSSG New Hampshire LLC. This property is located off of Shirley Hill Road. It is zoned Commercial Industrial Flex Zone. This property is at the corner of Shirley Hill Road and 114. And this, if this is sounding familiar to anybody here or people who might be watching, this is a proposal that was before us before. For various reasons, it was before us a number of times. It was essentially withdrawn. And while it is back before us sounding the same, it has changed as to the actual proposal before us. So, Joanne, is this application complete?
Yes, it is.
And is there any regional impact?
So what we did was, the last time that this was heard, the board found this to have regional impact.
Right.
So rather than you vote on regional impact tonight, and then we would have had to continue to another meeting, we advertised it as having regional impact, anticipating that you would probably vote that way. So the town of Bedford has been notified, as well as Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission, and they have received the plans. We haven't heard anything from Bedford or Southern New Hampshire at this point, but everyone's been notified. So you do need to vote on regional impact, but you could go forward tonight because of the notification.
And am I correct in understanding that it's your recommendation that the plan be continued to address certain outstanding items?
Yes.
All right. I think that sort of moves the process along, so I think that was actually a good move. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but
But I would recommend that you hear them tonight as to bring you up to speed. So this is a new application.
right, this is a new application,
Right.
so we still need to accept it and find
Right.
that it has regional impact, and notices will have been done in accordance with the requirements.
Right.
And we will hear the applicant and open the public hearing and figure out what else we're going to need. Jim?
So I move that we find the application is complete, accept the hearing, and find that there is a region.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, it carries unanimously. All right, Joanne, if you just want to bring through what we have, and then we'll have the applicant come up.
So what they're doing is they're taking the entire parcel that, as it was when it was subdivided years ago for the subdivision,
Right.
and they're merging certain lots together, so in the end, they're winding up with 3 lots.
And how many are there currently in the approved subdivision?
I have to count them.
More than 3?
9.
9, okay.
And that's being done as separately as a merger, a voluntary merger. So,
In conjunction with the withdrawal and then...
correct. And so what they've changed the plans from 5 megawatts to 2 megawatts based on what's going on in Concord.
I can tell you what's going on in Concord.
Okay.
They have 97 bills left to address, and the doors have been locked, so none of your state representatives who are there can leave, so they maintain a quorum to get through them all.
You bring in breakfast in?
Right now, they're locked in.
Yep, they're locked in.
Really?
Yeah, the legislature, when they have a deadline to meet, they need to maintain a quorum in order to be able to vote on bills. And they also have the authority to send the state police to get representatives if they do not have a quorum to
Are we
bring.
gonna call you Sue Smith tonight, so they won't know
Yeah,
you're here?
so I am very sorry that I had to leave to come chair this meeting, but I am here instead of eating pizza in the basement of the State House, so, and thank you all very much.
Wow.
So who's representing me if you're not there? That's the question.
The other representatives are there, so,
Our town
Oh,
is
thank
well
you.
Or is he at the Supreme Court?
Very good answer.
sorry for that little local sideline. We'll get back to the project. All right.
Okay, so, the project basically, it stays the same as far as the entranceway coming in off of Shirley Hill and then coming in off their separate drive. The total number of panels is 6,954. There'll be fencing all the way around the developed areas. And there will be a wetland crossing that they need to go for approval for the roadway itself, which is 4,700 square feet. They do have DES approval for the wetland and site-specific. I'm not sure about conservation, if that's been done yet. That's all set, okay.
On this application, you already went? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so they are requesting no waivers, and they're here tonight to bring you up to date on what changes they've made.
Well, I'd prefer to just hear it as what they're doing, because if you start talking about changes about a plan we haven't looked at in months, we're all just gonna get confused. So if there are any questions for board, Tim?
So Joanne, I see on the first page of our, your handout for this application, they're asking to have the voluntary lot merger be contingent upon the approval of the site plan. Is that procedurally the way we normally do these things?
Yes, that's what they did the last time, so I actually sign off on the voluntary merger forms. So what they're asking is that the planning board approve the site plan before we sign off on the voluntary merger. And then everything would be recorded. Well, actually, the site plan doesn't get recorded. The voluntary merger would then get recorded once the plans are signed for the site plan itself.
And wouldn't the voluntary merger come before the site plan approval? Because you have to have the lots configured correctly to have a project on the site.
And that's why they're asking you to put that aside, that, look at it as if it's 3 lots, but not actually do the merger, just in case this doesn't go through. They don't want to have to then reverse the merger. It's
Which we
common
had to do,
practice.
well, which we had to do with another application where we had to
Yeah.
reverse what we had
Right.
done because the application didn't go through.
Yep.
Any other questions from board members? All right, seeing none, I'm going to ask the applicant to come down and introduce themselves and show us what they're planning to do.
And tell us about net metering while we're at it.
Please.
Too long, we don't have enough time for that.
Yeah, it's a
Strike that request.
long story. Well, thank you. My name is Michael Redding. I'm here representing GSSG New Hampshire. This is Sean Corella from Novus Engineering. We're excited to be in front of you today. It's been a while, so my apologies for the delay. Thank you for requesting us to resubmit this as a new application. Considering the time and the changes, it certainly makes a lot of sense. The changes, as you can see, are largely due to the array reduction. As you all know, back in September, the state legislature did not override the governor's veto of the 5-megawatt law. And since then, we've been working furiously to redesign the array and working with our financial partners to make it a viable project. And that was a big challenge for us. We also were working through several challenges that were posed to us by Eversource and also by the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services Alteration of Terrain. So happy to report that we found a resolution and we're able to show the results of that on the plans here tonight. I'll let Sean dive into a lot of the details of the site, but just to give you some of these overarching challenges and what we've done, after several months of discussions and analysis of the grid infrastructure, Eversource has provided us with a point of interconnection plan. This allows us to actually access the grid and get that renewable energy back into the grid for local use. Both of those POIs, actually there's two, so there's a north and a south that are required by Eversource. And both of those POIs will connect to the lines along Route 114. DES also required us to redesign our array. There was concern over erosion beneath the drip edge of the panels. So we altered the azimuth of the panel alignment as if it's exposed due south. What we did was we made a tilt plus or minus 15 degrees to create this offset that would resolve the drip edge concern. So those were some of the big challenges that we overcame. I wanted to highlight those up front and just kind of give you some backdrop as to why it's taken us so long to get back in front of you. As I said, I'm pretty excited that we're here. We feel very confident with this project. I'll turn it over to Sean now for some more details on things and then look forward to your questions.
Thank you.
Good evening. As Michael said, my name is Sean Colella, professional engineer with Novus Group. Yeah, civil engineer, site design on this particular solar project. I must say that Joanne stole a bit of my thunder introducing the project here and going through the site location. She did a great job, so I'm gonna briefly do some high level. You may have seen this project
Yeah.
before last year.
Yeah, so if you could do a high level for people that might be watching or listening to this as to the site itself, where the power lines are,
Yep.
and the ledge that's associated with that, so people can understand where they're going. And Tim, did you have a request?
Before we begin, is there anybody in the audience that needs to see the plan? Because it's not facing the audience, it's facing us.
That would be helpful.
So maybe you could move your seat over a little bit and split the difference with us.
Yeah, it's gotta go, the plan
can
has
drag
gotta
a
go
chair
in a.
with you.
Plans here, so.
It's
I'll
gonna
just
be a little
review
challenging
those.
to get everyone.
Yeah, that's probably,
No, Sean, just go ahead and face it towards them. I got plans here, so. I'll
Okay.
just
Well, at least you can see where he's pointing.
okay, all right, thank you.
It's all right, I have a pretty good idea.
Okay.
Tim's a
Thank you.
Tim's a regular.
It's good to see you again, Sean.
You too.
Did you want to come over and do it for him, or?
So, the site is accessed from Shirley Hill Road through an existing drive that is shared with the abutter to the west, the salvage yard. The site is located here in the corner. New Hampshire 114 runs parallel to the property line on the east side. Again, Shirley Hill's up on the north. This was a previously subdivided lot, as Joanne had stated, from 1989, I believe, into 10. Less this lot here in the southeast corner, which has been sold off, so that's why there's that missing lot in the application. The proposed site features, a lot of them have stayed the same except for the general footprint of the array. Still going to access the site from Shirley Hill Road and improve a 16-foot wide gravel access off of the shared access drive that currently exists. There's a wetland crossing, which we already have approval from DES. There's a power company easement that runs from northwest across the site, southeast, and then further across New Hampshire 114. The access will go through the power company easement into the back part of the lot to the south, where the majority of the work is being performed, the solar array, the footprint. The site features include multiple stormwater features, detention ponds to mitigate stormwater runoff. They're currently designed to meet AOT criteria for the 2, 10, and 50-year storm event per their guidance. I've actually got a nice close-up of some of the
lots.
significant changes here that I think might help our case with some of the abutters. So what you're seeing here, and Tim, I apologize, this isn't in the packet. What you're seeing here is the southern half of the solar array.
Is that in our packet?
I don't see it.
No, this isn't part of the site plan.
Site
But I
plan?
wanted to create something that pops visually to show
Okay.
you the differences between the previous iteration and then what we're going for today. The area in gray is actually the reduction in disturbance and the reduction in the footprint. It's actually pretty close, it's just over 7 acres of the site that is now being left untouched and undisturbed. And we've pulled everything back from the butters in Bedford. The dashed lines that you're looking at here are the original stormwater detention ponds, and this is the last row. And what I've shown here is the last row of the solar panel, just to kind of highlight how close it was to the properties in Bedford. Since then, everything's been moved way, up the hill to the north. The distance is now well over 500 feet. I've got almost 520 to the fence line, more than 565 to the stormwater detention ponds, and greater than 650 feet from the property line to the first row of the array. And that's all from the Bedford abutters property. The previous iteration was a lot closer. We're talking 63 feet to the fence, less than 100 feet to the stormwater pond. So we've greatly created a natural buffer that exists now in hopes of,
So the
being-
intent is for that area to be undisturbed. Will it need to be disturbed at all for construction or not?
It will not. Generally, and Michael can attest, generally they like to see something about 50 to 60 feet for shade relief and fall hazards, just to prevent any trees from falling onto the solar panels. We've already accomplished that because this area has been reserved for stormwater detention. So they've already got that
So they've already
clearance.
got
So
their
where the fence line ends, that's essentially where the tree line is gonna begin, because we've already made that buffer for shade relief.
Okay, and could you, just for my benefit, point generally to where the power lines are on that, the power lines would be on that?
Sure. So this
I
is,
can't
this is
tell.
the rest of the power company easement that runs through.
Okay,
We are doing our best to keep all of our site features out of easement. It requires additional review and fees, and it could delay the project, so we're doing our best. And that's why I've got the fence line is right on that line, so that we're not encroaching into the easement.
okay, thank you.
I don't have any more comments unless Michael has anything, we're gonna open it up. Questions or comments?
Let me just ask you, I think it's great that you've pulled it back from the edge there, and I'm happy that you've been able to make it work, so I said I didn't want to review the other plans. So does this mean your array is starting sort of earlier on the road when you come in? Have you just sort of shifted the whole thing down, or do you actually have less panels on this plan?
Less panels, yes, correct, less panels. The reduction is really felt on the south side. There is a little bit on the north side, so as you are approaching, crossing over that culvert that we've got approval for, the kind of start of the array is a little bit further than where it was last time, but pretty close in the same
Okay.
proximity. You just don't have the density that you once had before.
Okay, thank you.
Just to go into a little more detail, I think I calculated close to 13,000 less modules. So we went from 5 megawatts to 2. So
Okay.
Pretty good reduction.
And could you go back, could you explain, if you've got one sheet in particular, about what the entrance will look like off of Shirley Hill? Because there is a fairly, we're talking about the intersection of Shirley Hill and 114.
Yeah.
There is currently a fairly wide access point to what is the driveway to Hebert's junkyard. And
Salvage yard.
salvage yard. Sorry, I've been in town a long time.
So
It's the
you
junkyard.
can look at sheets.
I've been there many times, actually, pulled stuff off of cars.
You can look at sheet C 2.2 for the site.
Okay.
And there's, and then it gets into a little more detail if you go to C 3.3. And what you see here is the existing drive from Shirley Hill all the way back to where it splits is basically gonna be untouched. I think there's a contingency, Michael can back me up, I think there might be a contingency for damage if that occurs during construction. I think the abutter made a comment that he'd like it to be repaired in kind if there is any damage during construction. But we're not planning to do any proposed improvements or upgrades to that road. until
All
you-
of your work is gonna begin
That's
in.
right, yeah, we're gonna Yeah, right where the 16-foot wide gravel access starts is where that's gonna go.
All right. Tim?
So is that a shared easement, or do you own that easement?
We own it. We own the access. They have an easement from us.
They have an easement from you.
When I say us, I mean Gentle Slopes.
Channel slopes, right.
Gotcha, yes.
So if you own the road presently, why are you not making improvements to the entire road since you already own it?
The road is sufficient for our need.
Is it paved?
It is.
And what's the condition?
Fair?
Okay.
Is this a type of operation that requires regular access?
No.
So, on average, what is done, do you know what your client would be doing as far as site access for monitoring?
Yes. Most of it's done remotely now through the internet. We will go out.
Of course, why did I ask?
Right.
It's probably an app for that, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a
Well,
set
plus
of-
we all have to stay home because of the coronavirus, so we might as well do it remotely
The
anyway.
nice thing about solar renewable is that there's really no moving parts.
Right.
And so we can monitor the functionality of the system remotely, and if there is a need, we can send out a service tech to go and address that. As far as kind of routine or planned visits, they range from about 4 to 6 times a year. It largely would increase if we have a heavy snow year and we get mounding or something at the bottom of the panels that need to be removed so that it doesn't pile up on top of the panels. But for the most part, we're out twice a summer, beginning of the year, end of the year, to do some mowing. We'll do a check of the system to make sure that there's no gnawing at the wires or issues that may have been a result of some sort of animal. Make sure that the trees are managed appropriately, the vegetation that's beneath the panels specifically. Look at the road, and if there's any reason to touch things up, then we will. But again, 4 to 6 times a year is what we're planning on.
Thank you, Tim.
So follow-up, do you do winter maintenance on that road?
We will provide access for emergency purposes and for Eversource, so there'll be some minimal plowing that might need to be done, but other than that, no.
When you say minimal plowing, does that mean every storm, or when you think it needs to get plowed?
When we know that there needs to be access, then we'll go out and provide the plowing for it. For the most part, we'll provide access up through the front part. I guess you could say there's an old mechanics garage, so there'll be an initial area there that we're gonna wanna provide kind of a getting into the site, so that area will probably be plowed more often than others.
So in your opinion, is there any need for the fire department to maintain access to the site for fire protection purposes?
Yeah, they want to come in, know that they want to have access to the
Yeah,
site.
it said the
absolutely.
fire department comment is access in all weather conditions.
So when you can't, if there's a fire out there, you can't call the plow guy to come and plow after the fire started. So I'm asking you, on the record, if you intend to keep it plowed so the fire department has access all winter long.
Yes, we will.
Okay.
All right, any other questions from board members?
Yeah, I do.
Bill, sorry, I didn't see you.
Have you done any other of these arrays around the state?
We have, yes. We've got a few that we've installed, and we've got several that are in planning and development.
Is there anything that, if somebody wanted to see something that might be similar to this that you've done, where might that be?
Hillsborough and Milton are probably the two that are probably the easiest to access, because they're municipalities.
Okay. All right, Sarah, do you have anything on this?
The comments are very minor.
Okay. All right. At this time, gentlemen, if you want to have a seat, I'm gonna, if the board has no other comments, I'm gonna open this up to public hearing. I'm going to open the public hearing now. This is a completeness site plan review hearing and voluntary merger for map 3, lots 47, all lots 47, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. This is on Shirley Hill Road. This is Gentle Slopes Land Development LLC, and GSSG New Hampshire LLC is the applicant. This is the Commercial Industrial Flex District, which is on the corner of Shirley Hill Road and 114. Is there any member of the public or a butter who'd like to make a comment on this plan?
Just went to the bathroom. I think he'd probably like to talk.
Oh, I wondered where he went, okay.
And my comments about continuing it was based on the fact that we haven't heard
Right, I think we,
or the abutters, so depending on what he says, if he's all set, then there's just some minor things they need to fix.
right, but we haven't heard back one way or another from Southern New Hampshire Planning, have we?
No, well, I mean, not for this application, no.
Right. Okay. Jim?
I'm just looking at the comments. Conservation Commission, no comments. That mean none have been received, or did they tell you affirmatively that it has?
They had no comments.
Okay. Are we concerned on that note with wildlife corridors or anything in this tract? I mean, its history probably not, but I know in some projects like this, there is fencing that allows, call it mod fencing or something.
Yeah, no, not that I'm aware of.
Tim?
So for the
I mean, there's
purposes,
lots of coyotes up in the power lines normally.
Coyotes all over.
Chasing a cat.
at a prior meeting from this applicant, we heard testimony about the drainage calculations regarding to the panels and the discharge from the panels, and there was some discussion back and forth about how much impervious surface was being discussed. Has that matter been decided?
Sarah?
I didn't hear anything from the applicant about that.
Are there any issues in regards to the drainage calculation and impervious surface? There were some issues in the prior application that sort of were not completely resolved before they determined they'd be going another path.
Nope, they improved them by a lot. I checked them for the 25, 50, and 100-year storms. And our regulations only require a foot of freeboard for the 50-year storm. And there are only 2 ponds that slightly use the spillway for the 100-year storm, so it's very well designed.
Tim?
So I think it came down to whether the grass under the solar panels, excluding the concrete bases, was considered pervious surface, even though the panel extended beyond the base. And I think that was what the discussion was about. And I think there was legislation pending, or it was or EES hasn't decided on the decision on the impervious surfaces. And I'd like to hear from the applicant after the fact about that, because that was not discussed, and I'd like to hear about that.
Okay. At this point, I'm going to go back to the public hearing. Is there anybody here who'd like to speak in regards to this application? Whether you're a resident or a butter? Yeah, come on, Doug. This has regional impact, so I will hear a butters
So,
that may be in another town.
the first thing I wanted to talk about was what you were
First
just
thing
How
I'll
about
do
the
is
first thing you do is tell us your name and your address?
All right, first thing I'll do is, I'm Tim Ross. My address is 19 Whippoorwill Lane. If you look on the plans, I am to the south. On one of the sheets, sheet C31, you can see Ross on the left side, the very left side. Just to give you some,
And do you have one more of these? Mr. Raymond needs one.
I do not, unfortunately. There's
You can
one.
have John. You can
So
share.
what I just handed out was actually some guidelines from the AOT that discusses actually what, I believe your name is Tim?
Yep.
Just brought up, which is basically.
Could you
from
have a
my
seat,
under-
please? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. My understanding is basically it's the guidelines as to how to model the panels, as to whether they're impervious surface underneath, so forth like that. So basically, I just wanted to call it to your attention, to Sean's attention, Mike's and Sarah's. My concern all along with the previous iteration of the project has been, there's a creek, if you look at that same sheet, that runs kind of in the top left and runs down right over to the border of my property and my neighbors, and then runs through my property and pond and everything else. And I don't know if you recall, but last spring when I spoke, I gave you a handout with a bunch of flooded picture photos and everything. And so my concern all along is trying to make sure that this project isn't going to make that problem worse for me. And in one of those pieces as I dug into this thing and talked to engineers and everything else, and Sean as well and everything, was just how the modeling is actually done of those panels. And I know that the AOT and, different engineers have looked at this and said, yeah, no, whatever, about how that's done. So the AOT apparently just recently, within the last couple of weeks, released these guidelines that basically say this is how you need to treat solar panels in terms of your design for stormwater. So I just wanted to bring your attention to that. And the question I have is, to Sean and Mike, is did you incorporate this in your design?
We don't ask questions.
Well, yeah, you get to ask
Okay.
us, then we get to ask them.
If you could ask them that.
Okay.
So that's one question I have. So stormwater is the biggest concern of mine. I'm very happy with this design, that things have been reduced in size and so forth. Then pulled back. I don't know the distance was ever really a concern of mine, but I'm glad to see that it's reduced in size because it'll actually help with that. But like I said, one of the things I would like to, have someone confirm is just that the modeling of the panels has been done properly.
Thank you.
The other concern that's always been on my plate is, on my property, I have, unlike most people, a shallow hand-dug, 11 feet deep well. Nice little pretty wishing well, but it actually supplies all of our water to our house. The property was developed in 1975, and the well has always performed well. It's never run dry in the 15 years that I've owned the property, and in talking to the previous owners, they've never had any problem with it either. So with a shallow well, you're basically dealing with an aquifer that is not down in the rock layer, but actually up within the very top layers of the soil. And mostly what that really means is that the rain is coming down onto this property, absorbing into this property several feet, but not hundreds of feet, and basically running down. It's hitting ledge and stuff like that and running downhill and into my property, and that's how my well gets fed. So my concern has always been, will this actually impact my well in that regard? Because when you take vegetation off of property, there's less trees to help absorb it and hold it into the ground and so forth. When you start creating more runoff with panels and so forth, it has the potential to do that. So I've thought a lot about this and tried to figure out how do you actually ensure that there isn't going to be a problem on that beyond just the engineering design. And so the only thing I can come up with is asking if the board could possibly require some kind of performance bond for making sure that my well and runoff of that property onto my property is not impacted, or if it is, that there's actually some kind of funds to go resolve the problem in the future. I was thinking, of some kind of performance bond over a 10-year period or something like that, just to make sure something like that doesn't happen. Any questions for me?
I think so. We'll speak with the applicant and discuss among ourselves your requests.
Okay, thank
Thanks.
you.
Thanks. And did I see somebody else who wanted to come on down? And I apologized for my reference to the title of your establishment. I still refer to it as the dump, so what do I know?
My name is David Valancourt, and I am one of the owners to Hebert's Used Auto Parts. I did have a couple concerns. I am actually excited that something is being done with this property, as it's been, there was a development that was passed way back in '89 that just never happened. I think it was Edward Berg that owned it prior to Gentle Slopes. So I think it would just kind of more or less make my piece of property worth a little more if something was actually done with the property. But my concern is, one, is that building that's down there. I think George Burpee, who was the owner of our property, I think he built it on partially someone else's property. But are they gonna take that building down, that blue block garage, prior to this road going through there? And also, I am concerned about the road. I would say my driveway, I paved that driveway probably 22 years ago or so, and maintained it. It's easier to maintain if it's paved. So, I think with all the activity that's gonna go on back there, using that road, that right-of-way, I think it's gonna deteriorate vigorously, because I've been patching it every year to try to keep the potholes down. And so I am asking that when the job is complete, that maybe they can repave what is already paved, as it will probably need it after they're done. That's from Shirley Hill down to my fence line. That is where they go, they will continue on as
And then
being
they
a
go
gravel
off on
road, right? I do maintain that road every single storm to keep my employees and customers access to my place. So that's all I'm asking, really, is just if they're gonna be working back there, if when they're done, they could take care of the road to my place.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else here from the public who'd like to make a comment? Come on down, sir.
Thank you. Mac McMahon, 11 Suzanne Drive in Bedford. My purpose quickly is to be able to testify that what Tim is saying about his property is true. Maybe even taking a look at it from the aspect you mentioned, the 50 and the 100-year flood vein with the increase of pervious material, that perhaps a bond, if that is what you decide, would be helpful to Tim.
Can we have your last name again?
Sir?
Your last name, sir?
McMahon.
Thank you. Is there anybody else here tonight who'd like to make a comment during this public hearing? Application for map 3, lots 47, and it's -1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Oh, and 6, I don't think I said 6. I'm seeing no further comment, so I'm going to close the public hearing, subject to be continued at whatever date we might further address this project, if any. Jim?
Will you refresh my recollection, the one lot that's down at the end that's already built on, we made some arrangement, so, did we have to do anything to preserve that lot and its access in this application?
No, didn't we discuss that in
I should-
connection with when they withdrew the prior plan and
Yeah, I
we're
just
gonna
don't
do the
remember.
new lot?
Access is from Bedford.
So we don't need to do anything?
We just, when we were going to, when the prior approval was going to be withdrawn and the new lots were gonna be created, we were not gonna include that lot, because it had its own access.
No action we took in the last time that we have to carry over to
No.
this time.
Tim?
Well, they did include a spot on the proposed, I'm guessing, road that's shown on the plan that does touch that lot, so I guess it could connect at a future date, because it does have frontage on a,
That's,
something there.
that road was never built,
That was the original proposed road that we see on the plan now?
yes.
Oh, okay.
But that road did give them the frontage.
I thought it
in
was something that was
Goffstown.
proposed as an easement area or something by the way.
Right, they needed frontage somewhere in Goffstown to get the lot approved, but then the actual access came in the other way.
Okay, thank you.
So that's what that was used for. All right, we had a couple of comments from members of the public, of which I think as to the applicant, I would like to ask him, have you we got this alteration. This sounds like it's a guideline, not a requirement. Have you all seen these before or know what these are about? And what, to extent, do they need to be considered or have they been?
Both. Yes, absolutely.
All right, come on down.
Yes, so the alteration of terrain, as I mentioned in my opening discussion, was one of the challenges that we had to face. And so we did meet with them multiple times. State has been working to try to find a balance between, allowing renewable energy to develop into our state, but also considering the impacts to the water, to the natural environment. So we've been working with them basically for over a year and a half now to try to understand what their concerns was and to provide to them as much evidence of what we've seen on our sites. We've been in front of them many times. We have submitted an application already, and we've got comments back from them. And as I mentioned to you, we're addressing those comments. And with this meeting, we were going to resubmit back as a follow-up to our application for final approval. So.
All right, so I thought you had indicated that you had AOT approval. Your AOT approval is in process with
Correct.
this particular plan.
That's right, right.
Okay. Tim?
So, to the issue that I raised and and one of the abutters raised, what is the determination on impervious surfaces in relation to solar panels?
Certainly. So the state has determined that it is considered pervious 100%. The current guidance that you're seeing in front of you there, that current guidance says that up to 5% is considered 100% pervious.
Up to 5% what?
Slopes.
Okay.
From
Slope of the solar array?
The panels are considered 100% pervious.
Up
And-
to 5%
Up to
slope.
5%,
Well-
and you would only look at the land cover change that you're creating, if any, to
You
determine
increase
if
over the
additional
5%.
runoff is occurring.
So the question is, your drainage calculations are based on DES's determination on these surfaces, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
So they've determined that, I need to put it in the negative so I understand it, because I haven't read this, that a solar panel, essentially by virtue of it being raised from the ground, does not create impervious surface for purposes of a calculation until the solar panel is at a slope of greater than 5%.
Correct, and
Oh,
there's a caveat after 5%, but.
Hold on, I think I need
Correct.
to clarify. The slope of the land under the solar panel.
Right.
Thank you.
Not-
Okay,
not
that
the solar
makes much
panel.
more sense.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
Yep.
so does the slope of the panel have anything to do with the calculation? So it is entirely driven by the terrain?
Correct.
And that terrain has more than 5% slope or not?
It
I'm
varies.
thinking of the
absolutely.
hill.
Yeah, by us pulling it way back, we were able to get a lot more into the 5% range. So the caveat
Oh,
is
that's
that-
right, because the outside is where the slopes are.
Right.
Oh, yeah, so you'll notice on the contours that really drops off on the edges, and we've really been cognizant of pulling off of some of the steeper portions.
Right.
Okay, Tim?
So is there a deduction for the concrete pedestals that they sit on as an impervious surface?
They don't sit on concrete pedestals.
Oh,
They
okay.
do not. So they have a C channel that they will just be driven into the ground.
Okay,
And so that is underneath the panel.
okay,
And so that deduction is very minor.
I understand.
But it's part of the calculation.
Yes.
Okay.
Tim,
So
further
my next,
question?
you need a follow-up on the same subject?
On the channels driven into the ground, what happens if there's bedrock a foot down?
They put a screw, a small screw, like 3 inch in diameter.
So the second question goes to the, Mr. Ross's statement about his dug well. And have you considered the groundwater and different factors as part of your discussion with your client or your engineers on this matter that he has raised tonight?
Not groundwater.
The surface recharge of the rain to feed a dug well. Has that been?
Well,
I can speak to that real, I don't want to get into too detailed calculations, but in order for us to submit to AOT, there's a very specific worksheet that is a groundwater recharge volume calculation that we have to submit, showing that we have enough volume of runoff, or capturing enough volume of runoff to offset the impervious. And that's incorporated in the AOT package.
So to his concerns, is this being addressed or investigated by your firm to keep the groundwater charged? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think its point is that the DES AOT permitting process requires a calculation in regards to the surface that we're talking about. And if I look at C21, and maybe you could put that up there so you can tell me if I'm losing my mind, because I can never decide whether the little sheets or the big sheets are easier for me to see at this point, because I never know which glasses to put on. So the hatch marks, so to speak, that appear are your solar panels. And if I look at the ground slope, it would appear that the slopes are away from your solar panels. Is that correct? Pretty much?
correct.
As to actually the borders of the lot, right? The
Yeah.
north side or the west side, it sort of flows off to the west, south, it sort of flows to the south.
Yeah, that's accurate. The footprint of the solar array is sitting essentially on top of the hill where where surface water is running off on all directions.
Right, which is if DES AOT is considering the solar panels themselves to be pervious surface, theoretically, is not really changing much of the water runoff on this location, is that correct? I mean, I'm sure it does,
The
but I'm just
change-
saying the change is gonna be,
The change is due purely to the change in ground cover, so going from your woods and grass combination to grass. That's what
which are
drives-
more driven by the site than the construction.
Sorry,
Right.
did you repeat?
Well, because your changes in ground cover are site-specific as to the exterior of where the panels are. Okay, that's what I meant.
So, tell us again, what is the change, if any, runoff as a result of the construction?
I don't have the, I don't have the stormwater report in front of me. It's been submitted to Sarah.
Well, our rules are the stormwater runoff needs to remain the same, right?
Yeah.
And it does?
Or improve, or get less.
All right, well, I guess the question would be for someone who had a surface well on the adjoining lot, does it dramatically go down? Because we can't get into water law, there's absolutely no way to definitively determine water feeds. They still haven't figured it out west in Colorado, et cetera, and we don't have a body of law here in New Hampshire in regards to it, but we can at least try to make some sense of surface water runoff.
Off the top of my head, I don't think it does significant, I don't think it's, I don't recall it being significantly reduced. I think it improved slightly. And
Usually on a site, we're looking for them to improve the runoff, so reduce the amount that's leaving this site.
I understand, but I want to, I guess my point would be, I have an abutter that in a sense has asked for the runoff to stay the same. And so if you eliminated the runoff from this site, we might have an abutter that would be concerned about it. If I follow the logic of surface water and wells.
Sure.
And I have a dug well right in the sunken well, so. I
So
can-
yeah, that's that quandary about where surface water becomes groundwater and how they interact and what the importance of them are, absolutely. So with the stormwater runoff, you're analyzing how much is leaving the land, in this case, entering the wetland at the bottom of the hill, which is a really significant hydrology component to
Right.
this. If that wetland is fed appropriately, is not flooded so that it's surging and losing its capacity to retain and absorb, then you would lose some of that capacity, that ability. You were gonna address the
Well,
runoff?
I actually have numbers if you'd,
Great.
if you'd like to hear them. So there are 2 points of interest that really contribute to the wet area to the southwest and the Bedford abutting properties. 2 years, so I'll start with the wetland complex to the southwest, and this is going 2-year, 10-year, and 50-year. 0.30 to 0.31. In the engineering world, we would consider that a negligible increase. 0.01 CFS is very insignificant. 10-year is from 2.8 to 2.45. 50-year is 978 to 924. So these are small improvements, aside from the 2-year, which we would consider in the engineering field negligible. The other point of interest to the Bedford properties, 2-year, 10-year, and 50-year are as follows: 0.33 to 0.33, that's existing to proposed. 10 years, 2.57 to 2.46, and 50 years, 8.48 to 8.05.
Tim?
So, I think it's been stated that these are different scenarios. The surface water drainage calculations relate to the surface water as it leaves the site. The question about a dug well is subsurface water, not surface water. So, I want it to be taken seriously because the resident has asked us to require that you post a 10-year bond to make sure his surface.
Well, I think that's a discussion for us.
Right, but I'm just saying I want to differentiate the discussion here, because it's subsurface water versus surface water. And all your discussion regards surface water at this point, because that's where you have your calculations for.
Right, yes, sir.
I'll return back to the worksheet for AOT, which is the groundwater recharge volume calculation. In this design, there are 7 stormwater detention ponds that collect and capture water, and they'll hold them for a period of time. The capacity of all 7 of the detention ponds, when compared to the impervious cover, based on AOT guidelines, the capacity that we hold within the stormwater detention ponds far exceeds the offset for the impervious gravel drive and what AOT would consider impervious cover of this project.
And if I could just kind of continue with my story, which is, so that means that we're sending out water at a rate that is either equal to or less than what it was prior, which is allowing that wetland and that overall hydrology to continue to respond in the way that it has in the past. So it is our opinion that that things will stay the same for that resident.
Okay. Other comments by board members? The road. You own the easement, which you will be
We own the
traveling.
road, that he has an easement.
He has the easement, you own the road. Is it true that you have benefited by his betterment of property and that he has paved the road up until, at least for your purposes, until his fence?
So I am not General Slopes, I am GSSG New Hampshire, but I will absolutely ask that question of General Slopes to try to understand.
You need to ask that question because I think that some concerns about if the betterment has come from someone else, from the easement, and I think it's reasonable to presume that, how many solar arrays are going, even if they're much less?
A lot.
A
There's
lot.
7,000
Over
panels,
7.
correct, yeah, 2
The-
megawatts, yes.
And I'm assuming those won't be light trucks that are going in, that they're not carrying in 1 or 2 panels at a time.
They have to build a road to get in there, and that takes construction equipment.
Yeah, so there's gonna be a fair amount of construction use that I think needs to be talked about with your clients in regards to what will be left there.
Certainly, they're gonna hold us responsible to not degrade the road to any degree. And so I think the point here that needs to be further evaluated is the road sufficient for its current use and by what we're planning to do, as well as by the person who benefits from the easement. And so that I will do some investigation and report back at our next meeting.
Thank you. Anybody else have questions as a result of the public comment for the applicant? Sarah, do you have anything else for the applicant? Joanne, you've made a recommendation that this be continued to April 9th.
Yes, only because,
Well, there are some issues that we need to hear back from the applicant. We just talked about the road. I mean, I don't, does anybody on the board have any particular issues with the problem with the site as it's configured now and the concept of creating the lots in order to allow this to happen?
No, nope.
I'm not seeing any issues with it, so it's a question of,
the reason is because we have to get the packets out to all of you a week prior to the meeting, so, so that shortens everything up, which doesn't leave the applicant a lot of time to get their revisions to us and have them reviewed. That's why I suggested.
right, and I would like the issue of the road, if it's being addressed, to maybe hook in Sarah and, or, because I think in some construction issues, let's see what your proposal is, but sometimes we request third parties to look at things, and I'm not sure it's necessary in this case, but maybe DPW needs to chime in regards to road, but we can figure that out administratively.
Didn't comment on the road is because they weren't touching.
Well, I think it's gonna have to be touched, based on what's proposed to happen. Because I'm not sure it would survive in its current state anyways for what you wanna do, and I'm seeing you're a butter going, yeah, it's not gonna survive.
So if it would be appropriate to the board, then I'll set up a meeting with DPW or Sarah and the abutter.
Yeah, I think that'd be great to sort of figure out what you're gonna need to have there for your use and to make sure that we have something that functions similarly to what it does now. Any other issues from board members? Just for the benefit of the applicant, I don't want to spend too much time discussing it, but before we continue this, there has been a request in regards to the posting of a bond for basically an off-site issue. And I just want to have a brief discussion on this. We have other matters pending, so people don't go away thinking we may or may not do something on this, because I have to tell you, I don't think might be appropriate, but I'm going to look for other people. Sarah, did you have something that you wanted to say?
My concern with the bond is that.
The bond isn't for purposes for anything with DPW, though.
Okay.
That's
That was
not
my
what,
question
yeah, no,
is
that's not
who's
what we're
gonna be
talking about.
holding it? 'Cause I don't.
Yeah, no, okay, Jim.
I would rely on Sarah's conclusion after reviewing drainage calculations. We typically do not do that, and I could see a situation when we might, some identifiable risk based on her review, so I'm going to rely on her recommendation. I suspect she's going to find, based on what was just described by the applicant, it won't be necessary because there's no projected impact.
Right, and so the board understands, I believe that I do not think we have the ability to require the bond for something that we're not sure how you would measure and how it would occur. So if the applicant has drainage calculations that indicate essentially the functioning of the runoff and the detention ponds / wetlands that they have are negligibly, no, that's not right, but I tried, different from where it is now, and that it satisfies all requirements to obtain permits, I don't even think we'd be in a position to ask for a bond. Jim?
While I have the floor, as with the last application, last time, I have to point out my firm represents Bedford, but I don't think Bedford municipality has
Any
a
interest?
conflict in this, so I'm not going to
Okay.
use myself.
Thank you. Sarah, did you want to add something?
It might not be the worst idea that we recommend that the well be tested before and after construction.
Yeah, Sarah, we can talk about that, but I would not, I personally probably would not be in favor of that because we have no,
Right.
as a municipality, we're not having anything to do with that. And from a water use standpoint, if we meet calculations, I don't know how you would establish any causation to anything after the fact or when.
I just don't know that we can.
We're not asking, you. I think all we're talking about is you making sure the drainage calculations are as they represent them to be to check their calculations and that in fact, everything appears to be within our requirements.
That's
That's it.
correct when I was.
That's all we're asking for DPW to do. Okay, anything else for board members? Can I have a motion to continue this to April 9th?
So move.
Is there a second?
A second.
And the public hearing will be continued to that time also. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, it carries. Good night, gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda tonight is in regards to map 6, lot 1. This is a completeness review, site plan review application for a proposal to build an 81,950 square foot commercial indoor recreational facility. New Hampshire Sports Dome is the name that's being attributed to it at this point. This is the Monahan Family LLC. Is the owner, and NHSD Holdings LLC is the applicant. This is located at 376 Goffstown Back Road, Tower Lane. It is zoned industrial agricultural. This property, for those of people who might be wondering where this actually is on the back road. There is the Z1 Express gas station and I think it's the Dunkin' Donuts. There is a road that behind there that with storage units on the other side. The proposal is for a sports dome to be erected in that property so that as you look at the property down the road between the gas station and the storage units, the sports dome would be directly in front of you as you approach the property. It looks like we're going to try and get technical for this, which has me concerned immediately.
May have to have you move slightly to one side. I
The
apologize.
moving doesn't concern me, it's getting
Getting the
things to
technical
act.
aspects to work.
The last time we tried technology in this room, it didn't quite work out.
We brought hard copy backup, so if we're unsuccessful here, move to plan B.
That's what I wanted to show you. This is windy. So if this is in the parking lot, it's the same type of.
All right. Here I am. All right, Joanne, you wanna, is this application complete?
Yes, it is.
Does it have any regional impact?
Yes, this is another one that the staff felt that it had regional impact, so we went ahead and notified it as having regional impact, but the board would still need to vote on it.
Have you heard from anybody in regards to the notice of regional impact?
I did speak with the planner from the city of Manchester. They did receive a copy of the traffic review, and they are here tonight. Kristen? They're just here to listen, basically.
Okay. All right, and are any waivers requested?
There are, I don't think so, let me just double check.
We have the one, Joanne.
Oh, there are 2 conditional use permits that are needed. One is for the maximum building footprint, which is greater than 50,000, which is what is allowed in our ordinance.
But there are no waivers requested.
There's one waiver from the Development Regulations Appendix F, Section 2.
Yeah, street trees.
2.2.d, street trees. They're asking for a partial waiver to provide 14 street trees where 19 are required, and that would be along the Tower Lane side of the property.
All right. Do you see any reason why this application is not ready to be accepted?
No.
Okay, can I have a motion?
I move that we grant the waiver request solely for purposes of acceptance, but not for review on the merits, and that, assuming that's approved, we find that the application is complete and accepted for hearing, and find there is a regional impact.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? It carries. Before we begin the presentation, Joanne, I've explained where the property is. Is there anything else for the board to consider before we hear the applicant's presentation?
No, the only thing that I failed to put in my recommendations was part of this plan includes a relocation of that emergency access easement, which they're using to enter their parking lot site, portion of the parking lot.
That would give us back about 2 weeks of our lives.
It's on the overhead as well, just
Could you please, Joanne,
So-
could you please go over that a second time, explain exactly what you're talking about?
Yes, so right now, there's an emergency access easement that goes through this site and then enters into the self-storage facility, which is
We've
right
spent a
below
little
this.
time talking about that.
heard.
They would like to relocate that easement. You can see it right up there. The green is the relocation portion. The
This is
black,
the one we've previously spent a fair amount of time discussing.
the black is where it is now, which goes straight through their parking lot. So I forgot to mention in my comments that we will need, they did do an easement plan. We will need the actual documentation signed off by all of
Everybody.
the easement holders.
Okay. All right, does the board have any other questions before we hear this presentation? Okay, so done?
Yeah, slide over.
Oh, you gonna slide?
Yeah.
All right, I was gonna move chairs, but that's fine.
Slide down.
Okay, good evening. Let me first introduce myself and the project team. My name is Nick Golan. I'm a licensed engineer and senior project manager with TF Moran. Here this evening on behalf of New Hampshire Sportstone Holdings LLC, Mr. Frank Bizzaro, who's to my right, as well as Joel Hatton and Alden Moore in the crowd, as well as the owner of the property, that being the Monahan Family LLC, Mr. Tom Monahan's with us as well. I was going to take the time to say exactly where we were, but being that we have done so already, I'm going to hand it right over to Frank. What his intent with his kind of elevator speech is, tell us a little bit about what is New Hampshire Sportstone Holding LLC. Why are we proposing this indoor soccer field here? And just a little bit about the project so we can understand it better. If you would, Frank.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for your time tonight. I'm Frank Bizzaro. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for New Hampshire Sportstone. And what we're looking to do here is create a single-size turf field that has an inflatable dome over it so that it may be used during the winter time. Basically, what we're looking to do is we're looking to utilize this facility for athletes that are basically 13 and older that would use a field of this size. From experience for myself and Joel with our kids growing up, during the wintertime we've found that there's not a lot of places for teams to train and practice throughout the colder months. There's a lot of competition from a variety of sports to do that. So what we've developed here is a plan really to establish a turf field that can be used by a multitude of sports. The important factors to it are the size of the field, that it is basically 70 yards by 110 yards. It has no obstructions in the middle of the field, which is different than what you see when people use a converted warehouse. And basically, this is designed for athletes that use a size field this large, and it's not really restricted at all from youth at the age of 13 all the way up to as you can see there, that's kind of what it looks like. It can be used for people of all ages for just any kind of use that you would use a turf field for. We're excited to potentially bring this project to Goffstown. We're also working on one in Hooksett right now, and we feel that this would be a very ideal location for us to service the community and the town.
Okay. One thing, can you just touch on, when we're talking about that we have, this is kind of the 13 plus, these are our higher level athletes. These are the folks that need a full-size soccer field. These aren't necessarily our 5 and 6 year olds who are bopping around out on the neighborhood field. These are our higher level athletes. And as far as how they're going to arrive and depart from the facility, this isn't a team that necessarily is going to be bused. This is parents that are dropping off their kids and the like. Can you just expand on that for me?
Correct. Generally, how we see this is that the age group of athletes that will use this facility, they're either going to get dropped off by their parents to use the facility.
Go back to the site plan.
Oh, of course.
They're either going to get dropped off by their parents or they're going to drive to this facility themselves. It being just a single field, there's a limit on how many kids and how many athletes can be on that field at any single time. So the way we've developed our plans for this facility is that we're looking for an occupancy load of 200 people at a maximum. And that will allow us to basically, with the age group that we're working with, practices or any type of games, scrimmages of the like, generally take an hour and a half to 2 hours to complete. So we'd be looking at turnover of approximately 80 to 100 athletes and people every 1.5 to 2 hours during the day.
Okay, thank you, sir.
To get a little more into what Nick was asking is, we don't foresee that this is a facility that's going to be used by organizations that have buses. This is basically going to be used by various organizations that you consider club organizations that basically recruit kids from different locations and then create teams, and they're looking for practice and game areas for their teams to use during the wintertime.
And what's the proposal for access to the storage units?
I can answer that one. So that very much takes us back to our easement plan.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll make sure we address this, but I want to make sure I answer the question first, that being access off of Tower Lane, the existing driveway to the self-storage units is the area in pink. That is the paved surface that provides access.
Excuse me.
What we would do is we would remove that central portion of paving that would otherwise have gone through our parking lot and relocate it in this green section. Now, all the turning radiuses that have been prescribed here meet emergency vehicle service requirements as well as oversized vehicles that could potentially need to use the self-storage facility. So there's no modification to the ability of turning movements other than the fact that it would be ideal not to have them drive through the middle of our parking lot. So we've worked out an agreement so that it could be relocated to the outside.
Jim?
So, it all sounds great. How are you going to stop your patrons from parking in the access road when the parking lot's full and blocking the road to the self-storage units?
I don't want to jump too far ahead.
All right, well,
but
if you're
I-
going to
I
address
wanna
that
make
later, we
sure-
can get to that after.
I am going to make sure we address that. 'cause
Okay, well,
parking's gonna be
I'll
a
wait
big
for
part
your
of
answer.
this. Thank you, sir. All right, so if we can, let's talk a little bit about our site. So what I'd like to do, if I may, let's talk about our indoor field, what exactly it is, where it's located, what are some of the various components to it. We're going to talk about access. We're going to talk about the parking layout, as there is a conditional use permit before you this
Well,
evening.
do we really need to talk about the field itself? This is an enclosed building,
If you guys
right?
feel you got a handle on it, I'll skip
I
right
don't
over
really
that.
see the need. What I would like to know is about what your utility servicing is going to be and what you're going to be using on the site, because I think
Okay.
that's more of a planning issue. Jim?
Well, I do want to know more about the use, because the applicant has said there'll be games. Games attract at least parents.
Right, but we don't
So-
need to be looking at pretty pictures
not-
of turf
not the field
and soccer
itself,
nets
but-
and any of that. I'm
Mix
more
that
interested in
portion
the
of the
site plan.
presentation.
David?
I'm not sure he said games. He said practice.
No, he did say.
Yep, they would be games.
Yes.
There'll be games.
He did
I'll
say
make
games.
sure,
Yeah,
I'll
you're
try and
not-
do this
you're not
as
building this without having
efficiently as
games.
possible in a nice sound order so that we can make sure we address each item.
Okay.
So relative to the structure, that being the indoor field, the air-supported structure, it measures 350 feet by 230 feet. As Frank mentioned, that's the size required to provide the full-size soccer field. It also drives the height of our structure. Now, we did receive a variance for the height of this structure, for a height not to exceed 75 feet. And we also received a variance for our use, that being an indoor recreational facility. Now, the problem we ran into was figuring out what exactly we call this, because the closest thing we could find was indoor recreational facility, which really isn't a good fit, but there isn't a indoor sports field within the zoning ordinance. So we worked with Nancy, we worked with Joanne to come up with what we thought was the best way to describe this. And unfortunately, it doesn't really fit into that typical bundle of goods for that type of use. So that's why you see some of the relief request as it relates to parking. But relative to the layout, this is our field that's located within. We saw a nice picture of that before. I won't go back to that. We do have an airlock here that takes you out to a 50 by 20 support building. This is where your bathrooms are located. There are no concessions. There'll be a couple of vending machines. There will be a small area for people to check in. That's it. So this isn't the idea that you're going to a mass sporting event. There is no fixed seating within this structure. If anybody's planning to watch this, they're watching from the sidelines. So as we work our way through the site, we mentioned we're right off the entrance from Tower Lane. The relocation of the access or the folks out back for the self-storage. Our parking that is laid out running east to west here. Just to the south here of our building, we have our dumpster enclosure, so there will be some level of trash removal that's required, maybe some cardboard boxes or otherwise, but there's a double unit provided there. One of the questions was utilities. So we do have a utility enclosure here, so this will be a concrete pad that will be fenced in, and within that area, we have a couple of important components. We have our heat and air inflation unit. We have an emergency inflation system. And then just beyond that, we also have the structure in a paved area behind it. But the importance of this system is it is an air-supported structure. So you need to have constant pressure, which means there's a fan. Now that fan does not run all the time. The fan runs when it needs to maintain the pressure within the structure. So that is variable relative to weather. If it's a colder day, if there's snow on the structure, they're going to turn the heat up a little bit, so you're going to have that fan kick on. But one of the important things is, well, what happens if the power goes out? That's why we have the backup unit. That backup unit is tied to the electrical, but it is also tied to the propane tank that's provided on site. That's just a typical safety measure for any type of structure such as this. So that's where really all of our mechanicals are really located right within here. The air itself is pushed underground and then up into the structure. As we continue to work our way around the structure, we see this area here. This is the vehicle airlock. And you would think, oh gosh, what do you need vehicle airlock that large for? Are we going to have gun shows and boat shows and all these things? No, we are not having anything like that. Our variance is specific to athletic uses only. If we were even to bring a cherry picker inside after the field is installed, we need to put boards across it so it doesn't damage the field. This is essentially a multi-million-dollar field. We don't want to be driving vehicles over it so that it is being disturbed. But what this is really for is to construct the structure. So when you get inside, we saw some of the lights hanging from the ceiling or otherwise. That's what that access is for. Also, if they need to bring in goal nets or otherwise, that also provides them that opportunity. You'll see two other gray boxes at the front of the structure. These are our air conditioner units. Hot days, we want to make sure we stay nice and cool. Also surrounding this structure and somewhat obscured just by this black outline, and this shows it a little better here, these are our emergency egresses, and they're located all the way around the building. So that's a condition of any building permit relating to these structures. You're also going to see that you have a 10-foot paved area outside of the structure. That's actually a requirement of NFPA relative to the siting of one of these. If you have an air-inflated structure, you have to have a minimum of 10 feet clear, non-combustible around it. So that's also why you'll see our landscaping is strategically placed at an appropriate distance away. You're going to see a few black dots here. These are our site lights, and that, again, is for emergency egress. We try and maintain a minimum 1-foot candle around the structure, and these are downcast lights. These are night sky compliant. And the intent being that they're lighting just that area directly around the structure so that if there was a reason that emergency egress needed to be used when it was dark out, they would have the opportunity to exit in that direction and then exit out to either through this gate out to the cul-de-sac or a rallying point that would be out in front of the building. So we've talked about our airlocks, our air conditioner, we talked about our mechanical enclosure. We talked about our attached support building. We'll talk a little bit about access. I think we may have covered it, but just to make sure we cover our bases, the access easement that exists now provides access to the self-storage. The pink portion is the current paved area. The hatched portion is the easement itself. What we'll do is we'll relocate just a portion of that to here. where we'll have the opportunity then to provide that paved surface, and you can see the radiuses as shown on the plan. They're almost a mirror image, so that we can provide the appropriate access into the self-storage area. Now, parking was the next thing we wanted to talk about. Now, I'm going to flip to our site layout plan here. When we first had the opportunity to come in and meet with staff, we presented our arguments based off of IT, so Institute of Transportation Engineers. They say for a sports field, this is how many parking spaces you need. So on average, and this is within our conditional use permit, and I'll read through a little of this because I think it's going to be helpful. Because the reality is there was no real comparable uses for an indoor sports field within the ordinance. So we had to look outside of that, and we found that information in the IT parking generation manual. They have a specific use code, that being 488, which is for a soccer complex. In the IT manual, the average parking supply ratio for the 12 study sites with a parking supply information was 41 spaces per field. So IT is telling us, on average, for the 12 study areas, there's 41 parking spaces. All parking demand count in the database, so for all the information they brought in, we're taking during a tournament or league games for which a series of back-to-back games were held on the field. So I think that's really important because that ties in directly to what we're doing here, where if they're having rented space that will be an hour and a half to say 3 hours and that parking lot's going to turn over, then we need to be ready for that. So in order to provide what we felt was an appropriate level of conservatism, what we did was we selected the 85th percentile peak period parking demand for the one field in the study that generated the largest demand. So of all the studies they did, we said, all right, what was the largest number? Let's take that. Let's take the 85th percentile, which would be the engineering metric for the parking, and that was 74.3 run. So we rounded up to 75 because we like full numbers. Now, knowing that 75 parking spaces would be sufficient, we brought that to Joanne and Nancy and had the opportunity to really discuss. And this is what IT says. What's the comfort level? I said, well, being that we're not overly familiar with the type of structure, although we're obviously all familiar with sports fields, we'd like to have something extra just in case. So we said, all right, well, instead of 75, we're going to provide 100 parking spaces. So 33% more, 25 more spaces to be provided. And we had a little bit better comfort level there. And we came back after we obtained our variances and we said, well, 100 spaces is good, but what if there's a problem, even though you're providing more than you need to? And what we did is we designed our site, both from a layout and grading and drainage standpoint, to accommodate an additional 22 more parking spaces. So opposed to providing the 75 that ITE says we need, we're providing 61.5% more with the 25 that will be built initially and the opportunity to build another 22.
Isn't that the access easement that you're proposing to move?
It's on the outside of it.
It's on the outside of it, so it's not within the drive
Oh,
aisle.
that's right, because
Yep.
it's, it butts your parking heads.
So-
Okay.
So one of the things you always run into is, oh, well, you've allocated the space, but you didn't design your drainage for it. So then you're gonna have to go in, you're gonna have to rip up your drainage basin, you're gonna have to redesign it. Well, talking with your town engineer, with Tara and Joanne, said, well, why not just design for it now? Okay, so we've designed our stormwater management facilities to accommodate 122 parking spaces. So that pavement that will not be built unless absolutely necessary is accounted for in all of our drainage study. Which we thought was an important point, that if we're gonna go ahead and make the statement of, okay, we don't have the 100% comfort level from the staff as to the number of parking spaces, let's allocate a few more. So instead of providing 75 parking spaces, we're providing essentially 122. One of the other components we want to make sure we chatted a little bit about, which is important to any facility, is utilities. Now, I touched on it briefly, but we're going to skip to our utility plan and take a little look at that. I mentioned the site lights that are located around the property. Other services we need. Well, we obviously need electrical. So we have a transformer pad that is proposed. The infrastructure is already there for us, so we have the opportunity to connect to that. We will relocate the existing service to the self-storage facility. That's going to be relocated around the property and located 100% within the easement, which it should be located in. I don't know that we have a definitive location of where it is now, but it may be just a little bit outside. But we'll have the opportunity now with this plan to make sure that that component is located wholly within the area that it's supposed to be. Other components of interest, water service. So we have provided our plans to Grassmere Village Water Precinct. We received an approval, I think, as of yesterday, for the proposed extension, and I did forward that correspondence to Joanne, so she would have that. This will be a privately owned hydrant. That's the way the process works, so they'll be responsible for maintaining that. We'll have a domestic feed as well as a fire protection feed that'll support the bathroom building. Speaking of the bathroom building, that makes us want to talk about septic. You can see our tanks located outside the building. We will pump to a location that is indicated right here. This is on the westerly side. So what we've done is we've pushed this back as far as we felt comfortable so that snow storage doesn't become an issue. We've allocated a tremendous amount of area of snow storage for this property. So knowing that they're going to want to plow this area, we provided a band that's 40 feet wide for snow storage around the limits of the parking. There's an area upstream of the stormwater basin. There's one located here, as well as downstream. And given that we do have a structure of 80,500 plus or minus square feet, where's that snow going to fall? It's going to fall right off the side of the structure, being that this is an air-supported structure. It's a dome. So we have the ability for our snow storage all the way around the perimeter of our building, where the reality is 3/4, if not 4/5 of our snow is going to go. And well, where's it going to go? It's not going to go across our parking lot. It's not going to go onto a butter's property. There is a defined drainage channel within this easement here. We will capture all of our snow melt and stormwater runoff in a bioretention area that's located here, prior to it discharging along a swale line, where it'll ultimately end up in a larger stormwater management area that has been designed essentially such that it has zero discharge. So we will be maintaining all of our volumes and peak flows on our site when it comes to the stormwater management for the site. What's another thing we like to talk about for site plans? Landscaping. Let's take a look there. Now, you'll note that there is a waiver request in your packet as it relates to landscaping. It's kind of an odd request, but so I wanted to make sure I expanded on it. We have 14 street trees. 19 are required based off the amount of frontage we have. Now, we're asking for a waiver essentially for this portion. We have provided a total of 30 trees for our project. Now, we have Norway spruce and blue spruce. These are for the purposes of providing screening to our budding uses. There is a section plan that's located within your packets, which I can hearken to if we'd like. The purpose of this screening is to screen that abutter. We provided a section plan to show what it would look like from the back of their yard, as well looking across to show that we can completely screen our proposed project with these trees alone, but what we've done is provide a layered effect so that these are the screening trees, and then these are shade trees that provide more screening for our parking lot as well. And we'll get to this when we talk about sight lines, which is coming up next year. You're also going to notice a few more evergreens located out here at the frontage. And those are strategically placed also in order to limit sight lines. And Gail's kind of heard this before, but I apologize. I'm going to have you hear it again to make sure everyone else can hear it as well. But that was a central point of the variance that was achieved. It's up to a 75-foot tall structure. You need to be able to make the case that it fits within the community. And how we have done so is the internal landscaping plantings you see here, as well as providing screening for the important sight lines that were determined by the zoning board. Those sight lines included heading eastbound out of Goffstown towards Manchester, where this screening becomes important, and then also heading west from Manchester into Goffstown. And I've got some good graphics that we can look at in regards to those. But overall, we've got 30 trees. There's 186 shrubs. These have been selected of various heights and ornamentations, so we have somewhat of a layered approach. We realize we have a really tall building. People are going to see our building. But it doesn't mean that we can't provide an attractive entrance experience. So one of the things you'll notice is the massing of plantings as you come off of Tower Lane. This is where you see a couple of our evergreens various perennials, and then some of our sturdier trees. These are our American elm, scarlet oak, and red maples. And being that we are using a low-impact development criteria for our stormwater management, that being a bioretention area or a rain garden, that means the rain garden gets plants too. That biological uptake from those plants is it's great value. So you have something attractive, and it's also providing an engineering function. It's really a win-win on both sides. So from landscaping, I was hoping we could kind of transition here to talk a little bit about sightlines. Now, I realize we're not as interested in what the field looks like on the inside, noted, but maybe we want to spend a little time talking about what it looks like on the outside. What I'm going to show you here, this is Weymouth Point, is that right, Frank? Sound right? It's a sports field in Weymouth, Massachusetts. This is really the closest representation to a structure that is essentially the same thing as what we are providing. Now you can see that they have multiple fields. This is the structure, the air-supported structure that they have. But you can see how it fits in essentially with its surrounding area. We did do an evaluation of their parking as part of our conditional use permit. They have approximately 67 parking spots per field, which we thought might be important to mention as part of this.
For the dome or for all those fields?
All of them, so 67 per field. So they've got 4 fields out there, so on average, there's 67 per field. Now, this is a street view, so same height structure. You can see that's a 6-foot construction fence in front of it. This is the main drag through this portion of Weymouth, but although this is still under construction, I think it gives just a good perspective as to what this looks like from essentially 30 feet away, 40 feet away. Our structure is placed between 350 and 400 feet from Goffstown Back Road. Elevationally, we are not at the same grade, which is what we were looking at here. We're set down approximately 12 to 15 feet from the high point in Goffstown Back Road. Now again, this is just another image so you can get a little bit of a feel for what it looks like on the outside. These are the emergency egresses. You can see those spotted throughout the field. This is more of a primary entrance, which would be a turnstile. And I just like this picture, so I wanted to provide you guys this one too. It's really hard to say, well, what's it gonna look like at night? Well, I don't know, but this is what it looks like at dusk. One of the important things is that the material for this structure is opaque, traps the light inside. We did see that there is lighting inside. It traps the light inside. This is not a glowing dome. We are not going to have any light coming out of this structure. It stays within it. The only lighting people are going to see is from the outside, and that's the emergency lighting that's required just for egress purposes. So getting a little bit of a feel for what this structure is, what it looks like, I want to give you a little bit of what we gave the ZBA when it had to do with sight lines. So what we did with them is we came in with this aerial plan. We conducted several balloon tests, some that were more functional than others as we got our worst snowstorm of the year when we conducted our first one, but we were persistent and we got back out there and did another one. But what we did, and being that the ordinance talks about whether it's a conditional use permit for the size of a structure or the height limitations, is what are the important views in town? So they helped us define those. That is the view coming from Manchester into Goffstown. The town line is really right about here. So if somebody comes around that corner, they're going to see some self-storage. What are they going to see beyond it? What's people's impression going to be as they enter into town? And then also exiting town, as we're coming again down Goffstown Back Road, and we're looking across the gas station. What are they going to see? So what we did is we undertook a pretty rigorous process of evaluating those sight lines. So what we did for the zoning board was basically did a pre and post balloon survey. We went out there and looked at different vantage points using the existing towers that are, the 4 of them that are on our site that would be removed are 205 feet tall, using those towers as representation to figure out what are we going to be able to see of our structure and from where. So some of the obvious ones, which we can start with here, and what I've done is I've provided a number sequence for this, and in your packets you have all the same information. So if we can, I want to see if we can go kind of half screen. We're going to look at a couple of these photos. So probably the first one to start with is, this was one of the important views. This is the view heading towards Manchester from Goffstown. As you approach the area in question, you can see there is an existing fence, although it's been additionally decorated by someone else. But as we approach that fence, we start to see our balloon. So that's the balloon that we flew at 75 feet tall.
Where?
I agree, it's hard to see. And when we
the
get
arrow is.
extra close, it is located right here.
Okay.
But it's quite fortuitous that the fence is located as it is, because when we start to drop back in our photo montage here, you can't see it because of the fence, just because of the existing grades, the height at which they installed the fence, and the overall height of the fence itself. So, thank you. That worked out well relative to sightlines in regards to this structure. But as we start to clear that fence, we know that we're going to be able to see our structure. So when we get to here, we know we definitely see it. Here's our red balloon. That's going to be the top of our structure. What can we do to try and shield that? And this was actually the easiest solution, is plant a row of evergreens, so that as a driver is coming through this area and approaching where this would be visible, then we'll be able to see it. They're going to be looking into trees. Because the reality is, if you're sitting in your vehicle, you're sitting in eye height, anywhere between 3.5 and 3 feet 9 inches. Instead of looking across the field and seeing our structure, you're going to be looking at some nice trees. And as you progress by those trees, then you will see the gas station itself, which is going to help obscure that sight line. So, moving on to one of the other important views that were identified, that being this sight line as we enter into Goffstown. And I think this was one of the more important ones that they identified. So again, conducting our balloon test. There's our balloon. So that gives us the height of our overall structure. And we did factor in the existing grade with the height of our structure overall. But we know, all right, this, as we come around this corner, that's the line of sight. That's what we're looking at now. So what we did is put together a bit of a perspective so that we get an idea of, okay, if we have a structure that tall, what's it going to look like? And that's what we're looking at, folks. Now, one of the things you do when you create perspectives is you want to make sure you're as accurate as possible. So what we do is we create a 3D image rendering. We use Google Earth information to supplement our own site survey data. We use the pictorial information relative to the balloon test, and then we have an opportunity to inlay that 3D model to say, all right, this is what it's going to look like. Now, that's kind of a grandiose statement, so let me show you a little bit more about how that inlay works. So this is that 3D image overlaid, so it gives you the perspective of the structure itself, its orientation, and again, you could see where that red balloon was to know where its overall height is. Now, what's important here is this isn't exactly what you're going to look at. One of the things we note here is look at all this existing tree line. Now, the vast majority of those trees are located either within a wetland or a wetland buffer, so removing them would be of some difficulty. So when we fast forward to our next shot, this is with our landscape plantings, albeit after 15 years where they've had the opportunity to grow in. Now, the initial planting height will be between 8 and 9 feet, so that's more than your average 6 to 7 when you're picking it up from the landscape shot. We've selected trees we thought would be fast growers, but have more of a vertical element versus pyramidal, because we don't want them to grow into our structure. So when we think about what are we going to eventually be seeing after our landscaping has the opportunity to grow in, that's it. So this was part of the ZBA's determination in granting the height variance, was that, you know, this is an important view in Goffstown, and that they felt comfortable with this. And we hope that the planning board will feel the same. Moving to one of the other items that was certainly required, and that's really jumping back to this, is those abutter references, and looking at each one of those photos for those abutters to see how each one of those views really looks. Now, some of these were taken during our snowstorm, which just happened to be when our balloon test took place, but I think it still helps overall give a sight line. This one's pretty obvious. This is the one from the neighbor's backyard. This is where we're gonna put that landscape screen such that they cannot see out of the back of their yard anymore. What they're currently looking at is 4 205-foot, one of which is blinking towers. We had the opportunity to meet with these folks after our first ZBA meeting. We went over a landscape plan with them on what we could do. It was agreed that it was a good solution, and we've moved forward with it. Looking at our next photo. So again, this is from the neighbor closer to Goffstown Back Road, further away. You can see the neighbor's house located here. They have an existing tree screen. There will be a supplemental screen that we're providing the other neighbor that would be in the back here. But again, it really limits the sight line with the existing vegetation that's there now, in addition to the landscape buffer that we're providing, which will also be on top of an earthen berm, just to further limit the potential of a visual impact on these neighbors. As we work our way across, so this is the view from, I believe it's Landmark Lane. We can see our balloon kind of flying high here behind the gas station. And one of the initial perspectives we were able to generate for the ZBA was, well, what's this going to look like? I think I've got the right one. Oh, back out of that. Front of gas station. So when we look at the two of these, here's our balloon. You can see the height of the structure. It will be seen from there. We understand that our structure will be seen from the bottom of Landmark Lane. And this is what we presented to the ZBA as part of our application relative to the height of the structure. As we continue to work our way,
What'd you say the change in elevation from Back Road to your site, about 12 to 14?
12 to 14 feet. If you go straight down from high point to low point, it's 12 feet. As you taper away on either side, there's an additional 3 feet of grade drop.
Okay. Jim?
Yes, sir.
So Nick, you said Landmark Lane. Looks to me like Landmark Lane is almost opposite Tower Lane. I think you,
It's a bit of it's a skewed view. So when we look at where we're standing right here, what we're doing is we're looking across the site. So opposed to, let's help ourselves out here. What this would really look like is something that's more like a little bit of an angle.
just looks like you're a lot farther down the back road towards the village in that
Sort of
picture.
like under the A in the word back,
Not the other arrow, is it? The one to the left of it?
looking
You know
across
what?
the gas
You
station.
are correct, sir.
I thought so.
That is so we're standing right here,
Right.
looking across. My apologies. Good clarification. That's our next photo. I can jumped ahead. All right, so just looking at, there was a butter photos that we were looking at before. We actually jump to the back here. And forgive me, I know I'm flashing around quite a bit here. This is that furthermost viewpoint. So this is 3125. This is that location right here, about halfway up Landmark Lane, and just giving a feel for what we have for a landscape screen that exists now. Our structure would not be visible from this location. Continuing up to the tippy top and taking a shot back, again, it gives you a feeling for what the level of mature vegetation is that's up there. There is a fair amount of grade change, but that does not provide a direct line of sight to the structure that which is proposed. All right, here's the one we're looking for. This is photo 15295. So this is sitting, and we can see where we are here at the end of Landmark Lane,
That's Landmark.
looking across. And again, this is a vantage point where we know we will be visible. And if we look at I believe we have one of this as well. So this is that, looking across from the front of the gas station. We can see the gas station off to the right here. Just again, to get a little bit of an idea of where it's going to be most visible. It'll be most visible for the portion of Goffstown Back Road that's directly in front of the site. Additional areas that we did evaluate, working our way closer towards Manchester. This would be from the parking lot. So again, we know that you can see where the towers are now, which are represented here, here, and here. So again, there will be some visibility from the parking lot. Now we work our way back, and this was one of the neighbors I actually had the opportunity to meet. They were kind enough to let us take a picture from their driveway. And they said their concerns had nothing to do with sightline. There's an existing raised berm there, which we can see, which also has thick level of vegetation, which corresponds to what we see on the aerial. Again, from a sightline perspective, so this is from the driveway furthest away. You can see where the bend in the road is. We're gonna have a more limited sightline from this location, as we saw in the earlier perspective. The vast majority of our structure is actually gonna be behind these trees. And last, we evaluated the houses that are under construction here in Manchester, and we did provide an additional perspective here to see what we'd be looking at. Oop, that was the one from across the street, excuse me. So this is the picture we looked at a little bit earlier. And that's where, I apologize, that's where it ends. So we know we are gonna see it from across the street, but as we enter into town and exit from town, there will be little to no sight line.
So can you go back, for the, we have somebody here from Manchester, can you please go back to the picture of the house in Manchester? Even though you don't have apparently a perspective.
Yeah, my
view.
apologies, thought I did. Where you would be able to see the structure is below the cloud line, but just above the tree line. And that was something we spoke in fair detail with the ZBA about. There was a question of, do we need to provide something from the adjacent house or otherwise? Everyone was notified. The visual impact, given the fact they're looking at 4 existing communications towers, this one which has a giant blinking light on it. We basically settled on, in my opinion, that this wasn't something that was going to be obtrusive to those folks, and that they'd have the opportunity to be buying their home knowing that this would exist there. So, as it relates to the requests that we have before you, the conditional use permit, I think, really ties directly to the
So
site.
are we done with the PowerPoint?
I'm sorry?
Are we done with the
Yes, sir.
PowerPoint?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, we are. So we can, let's close all this up. If we want to reference back to anything, please let me know. Otherwise, I've got some graphics that are behind me that we can use here as well.
No, this is mine.
But given the conditional use permit is for building footprint, our understanding is the intent with that ordinance, or with that component of the ordinance, was to limit the size of structures so that they wouldn't be out of place, to not create an undue pressure on police and fire with multiple level buildings. With this air-inflated structure, you don't have that. There is no 4th or 5th floor in which you're trying to reach someone for safety. Single flat slab in which everyone would be located. Knowing that the fire department was a key component of this, I met with Lieutenant Connors very early in the process. We had follow-up meetings with Joanne as well as Sarah as well, to get a feel for, are there any concerns? He wanted to make sure if we had an emergency egress identified correctly, that the 50 by 20 building would have appropriate fire protection. Turning radiuses were appropriate for their size vehicles. And then we make sure that there's appropriate signage for access to the self-storage. So I think we've accomplished those goals. So as of right now, there's no outstanding comments from the fire department. Grassmere Water Village Precinct has also given us a nod of approval. Sarah has conducted her review, and the septic has also been reviewed. The septic's already been revised and resubmitted, and now go to the state. So that's been signed off on locally, is my understanding. Sarah's comments were pretty straightforward. There was a couple good recommendations which we will incorporate into our site plan. From a staff level review, I think, Joanne, there was a note or two you wanted to make sure that we had added to the plan. And we also have Southern New Hampshire Regional Planning Commission, or excuse me, Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission, who has also provided a review. And I'll be following up with Carl Epping, who is the traffic reviewer, to make sure that all of his concerns are promptly addressed. One of the good points, they're all good points, but one of the things he brought up is relative to the approach to the facility, that the sight line is a little difficult, and it's not anything that we did. It has more to do with what's existing today. So I'm just going to drop this in here real quick so we can see it. So what we're going to propose is some additional signage to make sure people know that an intersection is approaching. Right now, there's a blind drive sign, but as you work your way around this corner, so again, this was kind of the sight line we looked at where our structure would be located over here. This sight line's a little tough, and as you're approaching this up gradient, we have our intersection up here, you know, one of their comments was, the speed limit is 35, but people are doing a bit faster. And what can we do to try and make sure that folks know an intersection is approaching? And one of the things that I think we'd like to suggest, and he said maybe some warning signage would be appropriate, an intersection ahead sign in this location would help people know that they have traffic not only exiting from Tower Lane, but also on the opposite side with Landmark Lane as well. So that was one of the ideas we were going to broach with him. So our expectation is by the time we come back to you, any of those comments that he had outstanding would be resolved. We did email back and forth, and you know, Joanne saw the emails as well because she was copied. He said no big red flags. There wasn't anything in the study that said we have failing intersections. This is creating an undue hazard to the mode of transportation in the area. It really just more some minor suggestions, which I think makes sense. One of his concerns was buses, if those were going to be used. I think Frank eloquently kind of mapped that out for us. That is not a part of this program. It's not something that's necessary. They asked to see, could we provide some bicycle parking? One of the things I do outside of my work is I help manage the Manchester Bike Tour. I'm a big fan of bikes. And if folks want to use this road for biking and come in to play soccer, then fantastic. We'll make sure we provide a bike rack for them. So I think they're all items, and there was only 5 or 6 in the review letter. So, and a lot of them have to do with, hey, make sure they show you elevations, make sure they show you sight lines, make sure you know what this looks like. Parking, can they provide some additional parking? So they saw 75, we went to 100, then we went to 122. So those comments have been, I think, satisfactorily addressed, and that'll be handled in a response memo.
Southern New Hampshire spoke about spectator seating. Address that.
Sure. So there is no fixed seating in this structure, and I believe that's actually a condition of our variance. Now, there is a sideline, and there's the opportunity for mom and dad to watch Billy or Susie play soccer from the sideline. Frank spoke to what the max occupancy of the building would be. It would be 200 people. That ties into that. It also ties into parking ratio. So if you've got mom and dad coming to see a game, more often than not, they're traveling in the same car with their child. We realize grandma or grandpa may come with or an uncle from out of town as well. But that's all been factored into the parking, because when we think about it, well, what were they evaluating in ITE? They were evaluating the same thing, just didn't have a structure over it. So in areas where the weather is a little more conducive to playing sports outside, and I believe a few of these study areas were those types of locations, they get to play year-round, and they were saying 41 parking spaces is needed. 75 is the 85th percentile, and then we bumped it up even higher. So we feel we've adequately accommodated the spectators that would be a potential. And again, this isn't professional teams coming to play here, where you would have a crowd of people that would potentially be looking to see it. This is more of your weekend soccer game, and the amount of people that you would expect for that.
Phil next, but before I go to Phil, no fixed seating was a condition of an approval?
I believe so. And if not, it was something that we provided as a suggestion to make sure it was understood that, you know, we're not providing stadium
All
seating.
right, but as someone who has spent many hours on the sidelines of these types of fields, even the terribly uncomfortable portable little bleacher things that they put out.
So to that extent, if you decide to bring your own folding chair, you would, I suppose, be able to do so, but that would be the extent of it.
Will your 20 by 50 lobby have any seating capacity?
No. And again, that bathroom is sized off of the applicable building codes, how many urinals, how many sinks, all those components, and they tie directly to the maximum occupancy of the structure. So we have the benefit of having gone through the building permit process for the Hooksett site, so
Parent, grandparent bringing the 13, 14, 15-year-olds. It's winter. They don't want to sit in the car for 2 hours.
They need to bring the
They're
chair
gonna
they
come
bring to the
inside.
summer soccer field. Yeah.
They're going to come inside with a folding chair or stand.
Yeah, welcome to the soccer fields, they all do.
That's
Phil.
the way it works.
You guys already answered my question, because that was my question. What are you gonna do with people bringing their own portable chairs?
I mean, I've just been to a number of them. They aren't huge
I've
seating.
got
They're-
3
Yeah,
young
right,
kids.
we've all been there.
I bring
with
my
the-
chair, I got a bad leg, I can't stand for that long either.
All right,
And
okay.
that's how it's handled. So it's very similar to what you would see on your local soccer field.
All right, There's a lot of information about noise in our packet, which we haven't
Yes.
talked about
So
at
one
all.
of the other things we realized after going through this process in Hooksett is people were worried about the acoustics. What is the sound that's generated from this structure? So in your packet, and I think it's actually in your cover letter, we talked specifically, there it is, to the acoustics. So I'm gonna kind of harken back to that, and forgive me, I'm just gonna read from it, and then I will talk a little bit about the sound levels. So, an estimation of sound power levels and specifications for the proposed sound generating equipment are provided in this letter. Based on the value.
Just, Nick, for a second, for people, if you're looking at the application, there is a letter dated February 21st, 2020, sort of in the middle of the 8.5 by 11 sheets. He's reading from page 2 of 4.
Thank you.
Okay.
And
Thank
if you
you.
continue
Continue.
through your packet, you'll find the actual power sound levels that came from the manufacturer to verify the information that which we're providing.
Can you let me go through it?
All right, so based on the values presented, the calculated sound pressure at a distance of 200 feet is 44 dBA at a distance, and at a distance of 400 feet is 38 dBA. For the Handbook of Environmental Acoustics by Mr. James P. Cowan, 1994, chart of common sounds and associated sound levels. So this is the standard that which we use to measure sound. This is equivalent to a library or a bedroom at night. Please note the closest property line with a residential building is located approximately 346 feet, so that's to the property line, from the sound source, that being where our mechanicals are in front of the building. From a sound source associated with the mechanicals of the air-inflated structure, and the residential home on the property is located at a distance of over 450 feet. And the same can actually be said for Goffstown Back Road when we're starting to talk about distances. So relative to the sound that's generated by the inflation unit, well, that's the component that would run most often.
Right.
That's what's managing the pressure within the structure. When it needs to kick on, that's the amount of sound that we're creating. It's a bedroom at night or a library. My library is pretty quiet, so that's a pretty good comfort level. Now, there is another sound component to this. This is the backup generator. So the only reason our generator is on is because all the lights are off. And I think we all know when power goes out, we hear a lot of generators. So it would be no different than your neighbor turning on their generator because their power is out. It would be that same equivalent level of noise. And it would only be on during that period at which we do not have power.
Peter?
Now, during games, will they using a PA system at all?
As far as interior to the field,
Yes.
I don't think there would be, with the amount of kids that we're gonna have on the field, I wouldn't think that's necessary.
There's
No.
one
So there's
field.
no PA system in
It's
the.
one field.
One field, yeah. And I think that's one of the big things we have to keep focusing back on is, it's one field, so you can only have so many kids on one field at a time.
Okay. Other questions from board members? Joanne, is the conditional
one more
use, all right, is the conditional use application in our packet and I'm just not finding it?
No, I asked Nick to summarize in his letter to address the conditional use criteria versus answering each question.
But you know how much we like that.
So within the body of the text, and if we need to read the various components of,
Of
okay, you
which
can have a
letter?
CUP if, so the conditional use permit, table 4.3 building footprint, so it's a
All right,
letter.
slow down, Nick. Where are you reading from?
From a letter entitled conditional use permit.
All right, I'm not finding that in my packet is the issue, Joanne.
It would look like this and it'd be about 30 pages, because also included
Oh,
within
it's right
this-
in front of the
Map?
maps.
Yep, so all those
The foldout.
sight lines and everything else, we thought were most closely similar to the conditional use permits. We tied
So
that
you've
up.
got one sheet in your packet that folds out. It's right in front of that. Thank you.
So if you'd like, would it make sense to read this into the record, or?
No.
'Cause the reality is, it's a reiteration of everything I've said tonight. Wherever, when we're talking about sight lines, have we evaluated the
You
important
will need
sightlines?
to go through them for approval when we get to that point. David?
Nick, have you considered pedestrian access to the
Yeah, so
Dunkin' Donuts?
it was something that we talked about, because are we thinking that there's the potential that we're gonna have folks going from Dunkin' Donuts?
Parking and walking.
Like, hey, Joey's got a game, I'm gonna walk up, grab a cup of coffee and walk back, which would be great for that business. The concern is if we provide a dedicated sidewalk between structures, although they're on different properties, it has to be ADA accessible. And the grade alone that's on Tower Lane far exceeds 5%. So that's why we don't have a dedicated drive aisle. Now, there is the ability for someone to walk from point A to point B, and we've designed kind of our entrance layout so that it's conducive to that, but there isn't a dedicated sidewalk because it couldn't be ADA accessible.
Jim?
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't see you,
She
Jim.
was sucking on her, and was sucking about Jim, isn't it?
So why you have that slide up there, Nick? Right there behind Barbara, about the sight line on Goffstown Back Road?
Oh, the reason why I was talking about this slide had to do with sightline as you're approaching that intersection. One of the Southern New Hampshire
Right.
Planning Commission's comments
So
was.
could you go back one to where you saw the trees?
Oh, sure. We're just using Google, so we'll just scoot back.
So my question for you is, have you approached the City of Manchester or the Public Works Department about cutting some of those trees in the right-of-way to
We have.
improve?
That was one of the questions of our neighbors, and one of the first things we did was we went and talked to Sarah, thinking, oh, Sarah can help us, it's DPW. And then we realized we're in Manchester, we're not in Goffstown. Because really the problem trees you see, and some of these have been trimmed. This is one, and then also as you round this corner, there's this grouping of 3 here as well. They also hang over the road to the extent where they almost reach all the way across towards the power lines. So I think there's a real good case to have these removed. They are within the right of way. The neighbor took no issue with it. They preferred it to be removed. So that's a dialogue with DPW.
So that's a
saying, "Can you do
consideration.
this?"
The boundary line is at that first telephone pole that's in the image.
Yeah, it's it kind of hides on us, but yeah, it's
Okay, that's
right,
one.
right here.
Yes.
Number 2 is you talked about people exiting your emergency doors out the back of the sports dome down to the cul-de-sac on Tower Lane.
That is one means of egress. Yes.
Are you going to do any work on Tower Lane as part of this project to bring it into conformity for a town road in terms of paving and those kind of things?
No, sir, we are not.
So it can't be a viable place because the fire department and such can't get down there, can they?
Can they physically drive down it?
Yeah.
Yes, they can.
Oh, so the blocks have been removed that were out there prior?
Question.
The blocks were moved down.
They're open with a chain in between and a key, I think, for the fire department.
So if you're going to call that a legitimate access place, so the fire department presently has a key to that chain to access there?
Just like right down here, I think, isn't it now?
Looks about right. So to that point, it is, that is something that is part of the building permit application. They'll have to establish is what are the rallying points in case there is an emergency in which they need to leave the building. Now, the fact that we have this 10-foot paved area around the entirety of the property, it provides them the opportunity, if for some reason the structure were to start to deflate, they would have the means to get out here. It is fenced around the perimeter, but there are gates located every 150 feet. Talked with Lieutenant Connors about that. He said every 150 feet, we're happy. That works for access. But the reality is, I would expect them to exit out to the parking lot. I would leave the way I came in. That is going to be something that they deal with at the building permit level, where they have to establish where is your emergency exit points. So I guess I went too far by saying they can go down there if they wanted to, but I think the more logical point would be if you're going to leave through here, that you're going to walk along the path out to the front of the building where your car's parked.
Okay.
But point noted. So I'll make sure I'll be more clear in that dialogue.
So to the point of the improvement of Tower Lane being a non-starter for this project, my other point was regarding the access to the self-storage units, whether it was advisable to create that road that goes around your whole parking lot versus actually constructing the access to the self-storage from their frontage down there at the bottom of the cul-de-sac, which is another end of the same emergency access road.
And we understand that there's an ongoing dialogue with those individuals. I'm not sure where it sits right now with the planning board. Our efforts were to try and make this as clear-cut as possible. We're giving them back exactly what they have now. If there is a concern either with that applicant and the planning board or otherwise, that it gives you guys the opportunity to handle that with them specifically without this project kind of getting in the middle of it.
So my first question there earlier in the night was how are you going to stop people from parking in the access road?
Because it's the driveway.
Oh, come on.
So,
The easiest place to park when there's no more spaces is to park along that curb line
So that
and block that
does-
road.
No, okay. Well, let me not be so flippant. Let me be a little bit more serious. How do I know that? Because I provided 61.5% more parking spaces
The
than
parking
we need.
spaces are still closer than the access road.
So we have 75.
Except for the ones that are on the outside all the way around, the other 22 that were
So
mentioned.
again, these are to be built if for some reason ITE is wrong and we have not provided enough parking spaces. So they said, give us 75. And we said, all right, we're going to give you 100. And we're talking with Joanne. She said, well, let's just make sure. So factor it in. Can you do that? And it's a little bit of an added cost because their stormwater management areas are a little bit bigger, but not significantly. But that was a reasonable ask. So how do I know that they're not going to park in the access road? Because there's more than adequate parking provided on site.
All right, and the last thing is your screening trees. We routinely see these beautiful circles that are the 15-year grow-out circles, but when they're put in, we don't get screening for 15 years. I don't like the way these happen because we have other projects in town where people have been highly disappointed and have come back to the board claiming the screening was not adequate because we allowed the pictorial representation of the 15-year build-out, which I think is inadequate for screening, because screening starts the day that the structure begins use. 15 years later, people who drive by that sports dome are never going to take another look at it because they won't even remember it's in there. So I'm a little concerned with mostly the one on the far corner over there, the one that screens the neighbor's place.
Over here?
Yep, that rack of 8 trees there you
So
have
let's-
depicted.
That's a good comment. Let's take a quick look at that plan if I can jump to it. Because what we've done is, those are 8 to 9 foot tall trees at planting. This is not your 5 to 6.
He had said they were tall at planting.
And this is a part of our zoning board approval, is that our landscaping be consistent with that which we showed to the zoning board. So we cannot pull a fast one and give you 5-foot trees where we said we'd give you 8 to 9.
Well, that'll be represented on the landscaping plan at some point?
It is represented on the landscaping plan currently, and the height of those plantings are in this zoning table, where we have Norway spruce planted at 8 to 9 feet in height.
Okay. Thank you.
Because I understand, and I've had that comment before from many a board who says, well, you said it's gonna be screened, but how long are we gonna have to wait for the screening? That was an agreement with the neighbor. We said, we'll plant them mature growth, 8 to 9 foot in height, which really gives you about a 12-foot spread. So from the jump, they're already gonna have that permanent landscape screen. And with the added benefit of the fact that we need additional parking lot trees, they got a 2-step process. They got some nice evergreens here, and then they got some nice shade trees here.
All right, and Nick, am I correct in this landscaping is actually gonna be below back road grade?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So as you come in, regardless, you're just seeing the top of the dome anyways. Right.
So as you approach down, so that was one of the things our landscape architect worked hard at was, all right, we know people are gonna see the building, but as you get down into the structure itself and around it, are they gonna feel comfortable? Are they gonna be surrounded by some trees and some nice landscaping? So that's what we have here with this type of design.
Jim?
Can you see this from the other side? Over in your neck of the woods?
Can I what?
Will this be visible looking across from?
They could barely see the top of the towers.
Okay.
You can,
so it's
through
not-
the trees, you can see in some locations, one light blinking.
So it's not a concern?
No.
I was really gonna comment that Tim and I will be here 15 years from now on those trees.
Well, I've
I hope
watched.
so, and I hope it's a
3 more
raging
anyway.
success.
And would your approval, would your requested approval give us a replacement policy on any trees that die as a result of disease, neglect, anything? They're on the plan, they got to stay there for the rest of your life.
How do we feel about that? If a tree is deceased and needs to be replaced, I think a comparable replacement is a reasonable request. I don't
Well,
wanna
that
make sure
would
I'm
be,
speaking
that
for
would
the
be a
owner.
that's a requirement.
But understood that, we're proposing a landscape plan, so if we went out and cut them down the next day, well, that's kind of contrary to our approval.
No, I'm not saying you would do that, but they do die from occasions, and we have had prior cases where they did not replant them. So we would want to make sure they are maintained
Remain
in
in
perpetuity.
perpetuity.
All right, any other
Just
questions?
one quick
Peter?
question. It's more a curiosity thing. How do you keep a white building clean like that? I mean, as you're driving by, you
It's
don't
actually a
wanna
lot
see-
simpler than you think. It's soap and water. Soap and water. So there is an operation and maintenance plan that goes along with each structure. This one's manufactured by the Farley Company. They provide a nice big handbook to the guys at turnover that says this is how you maintain your structure. So,
What's the lifespan of it?
we heard, was it 30?
Yeah, it's warranted for 15, and it generally lasts much longer than that.
Is this something that we need a removal bond on or something? Is this comparable to a?
Isn't it pretty easy? We just pop it?
It's harder than you'd think to take one down, but from the standpoint of why would we want to take it down? It's not a tower. It'd be the equivalent of asking for a removal policy for a building.
That's right.
All right, anything else from the board before I ask the applicant to step back and see if there's anybody here from the public who'd like to make a comment? All right, I'm not seeing anything, so at this time, I'm going to open the public hearing on this application for site plan with conditional use permit. This is map 6, lot 1. The proposal is to build an 81,950 square foot commercial indoor recreational facility, New Hampshire Sports Dome. This is on the Goffstown Back Road, behind the Z1 Express gas station and donut shop, and behind the storage units. Is there anybody from the public here who'd like to make a comment on the application that's here tonight? Anybody have any questions that's here on this application tonight? Manchester, do you need any more information? You're all set? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing at this point in time, subject to reopening as this board might decide to continue this application. Joanne, I know you thought that there were some summary things to be taken care of on this, but I think, what are you recommending the board do?
Well, Nick was going to speak further with Carl at Southern New Hampshire Planning. The items from Sarah are fairly minor.
Sarah, what's your opinion of the issues that you have remaining on this site?
Most of them are just little notes to be added to the plan. We've met with Nick a few times to address the bigger stuff before the plans even got submitted, so. They do have a proposed retaining wall, and I've sent those plans off to get an estimate for review and then construction review. I know they're working on it.
Where's that?
So between the self-storage
Number
and
10.
our driveway, we have a variable height retaining wall. And if it's something that we're able to work out with the neighbor, that they want to give us an easement to grade it out, we could do that too. But it goes from, I think, 2 to 5 feet, 5 feet at its highest point, and then tapers down to 2 feet on either side. So it's more of an E-wall.
All right, so you've gotten Grassmere Village Water Precinct approval. Do you still need to provide construction details for the swales and sediment forebay, and there are a couple of other comments, Sarah? Yeah, they do, okay. And what are the conditional use permits for again, Joanne? Your packet, page 9, I believe.
The size of the footprint, which is over 50,000 square feet, and the parking.
Okay.
Barbara?
Yep, Tim.
So how much over the allowance is it at 50,000 square feet?
So the building is 80,000.
Oh, that's the number they're
That
asking.
50
Okay.
is the number they're allowed.
So it's
950.
more than 50% increase in size.
Right. Keeping in mind that we're talking, because we don't have a zoning ordinance that fits this use specifically.
Correct.
Right? So where is the 50,000, what zone is that applicable to?
I believe it's applicable to this zone. I don't know about other zones, but it's definitely applicable to this zone.
As in commercial?
Yes.
Okay. So when we're talking about a commercial use for square footage, what my point is, we're usually talking about a substantially different type of use than what you're talking about. So while
Right.
Box stores.
Yeah, like a
this is,
retail.
Yeah, as compared to what is essentially an empty warehouse with soft sides, right? Okay. Tim?
Do we have a regulation for the percentage of the lot area that a building can cover, or are we covering that with this request for the conditional use permit? Don't we have a, or is it not
Percentage?
applicable in this zone?
So relative to building coverage, we are well under the threshold, because when we take the bird's eye view of our site, it's a big site, it's almost 9 acres. So although it's,
Oh,
the
so you're-
structure
So
itself
that
is
is,
fairly
you are in
large,
compliance with that?
we are in 100% compliance of that
Thank you.
requirement, sir.
You don't have a restriction for impervious coverage on a lot.
No, it's got to do with the building size.
Yeah.
All right, and the alternative parking arrangement, conditional use, is that really because of the inability to find something that specifically matches? Because it does seem to me that there's plenty of parking. Is this because we don't have a category in our regs that we can fit this into? I'm seeing the applicant
So it
nod
gives
his
an
head yes.
alternative in the zoning ordinance that if they have an alternative,
Right.
which is what they're proposing, the extra 20-something.
Okay.
That the planning board can go ahead and
if
address
they,
conditional use.
Proposed alternative, yes.
So in regards to that, who makes the decision and when to require the additional parking be installed?
We have not outlined that, but
You will handle
yeah,
that
that
point?
would certainly, if there's a problem with people parking on the roadway or.
We typically, when we've done it in the past, it's the planning board has reserved the
Right.
power authority
Call
to
them back.
come back and require it.
But I'm saying, we're not the parking police.
No.
No,
But if there, it becomes obvious that there's an issue out there, then we would ask.
We're gonna, town hall, there'll be complaints to Goffstown if there's a problem, because a lot of this stuff is gonna be at night and on
The
weekends.
last thing these guys want to have is a parking lot that's not the right size. You can see the size of the site. I could put more parking spaces. We don't need them. That's kind of the angst of the application, is we've provided more than is required times 2.
Peter?
Who's gonna complain on parking over there?
Well, if they're parking in the gas station parking lot, they're gonna
Right.
complain.
Well, but you're talking, Tim, you were
Or if
talking
they're
about.
blocking, or if they're blocking the access
Or
to
the
the.
people with the storage buildings are gonna complain and say, make them put in their parking spaces.
Okay, that's why I just wonder who would complain. It's not gonna be every Tom, Dick, and Harry in town.
No, it's gonna be the people that are affected by the overflow.
It's probably going to be the owners. They're going to come tell you, hey, we found out we needed 22 more parking spaces. We'd like to go build those.
Okay.
They have no interest in having a parking lot that doesn't work. That's just bad business.
Do we need to have that, if they were to request that additional 22 spaces, is that something we could address as a, we have to come back for another whole site plan for the
No,
ad
that's
parking?
why- That's why I asked them to include that in their
Right, so
training,
they don't have to
so
come
they
back to the
don't
board
have
to ask for the
have-
22 spaces, they can construct
It's
it.
their business decision
I understand.
to make the customer
I want to make
happy.
sure it was clear.
All right, so what I'm trying to do is to narrow down the issues for this board. The applicant has a little more work to do. It doesn't appear that the board has problems with this application. I do not have problems with the parking as proposed. I don't know whether anybody else does. It seems adequate, based on the information he provided in the packet and his personal experience parking at Fields. So I'm just trying to make sure we deal with all the issues here that the applicant might experience, so the applicant can have as soon as date as he thinks he can be ready to be back here for final approvals.
And then we just need that agreement that can be recorded.
Right, but you can do that post us. We can do that subject to administrative review and approval of that.
Yeah,
Or legal review.
thank you for framing this, because that in part was our question, in that I think from the perspective I have sitting here, which is maybe jaded because I'm working for the developer, it sounds as if there's a fairly good comfort level with what we're proposing. I know we have our conditional use permits that have to be specifically addressed, and whether or not the waiver would be granted for the landscaping. And then we have the overall site plan approval. Was there anything that the board wanted to specifically address at this meeting? Or is it more of coming back next meeting and just going through the procedural of, okay, you gave us the presentation, doesn't meet the following, X, Y, Z, approve or not, for each one of those bullet items?
I mean, that's where I'm heading with this.
Without waiving our.
Right, to change our
Oh, yeah,
minds.
if something comes up,
Right.
But we don't need a full presentation. at the
Yeah,
next
we don't
meeting.
need to go through all
Our
this
intent is
again.
we'd
We've
come
heard
back
it.
and we would just read those components so that you would have the opportunity to vote.
You'd
unless
explain
you need
anything
more.
that's changed since tonight's presentation, go
Or
through.
agreed upon.
Okay. That seems.
Okay, all right. So what date do you think, given the issues, you want to come back for?
I expect to have this all wrapped up on our end by Tuesday.
So you want to come
You wanna come
back for
on
the
Wednesday?
next?
I have no plans, I guess.
Can I ask one question? There was a recommendation about adding a light, a sign, intersection ahead. Does that need to go to the Highway Safety Committee?
all that.
Well, if it's gonna be
It's
in Manchester, it's
not
not
in
ours.
Goffstown.
Oh, that's right, the sign's in Manchester.
If it does, it's gonna be close, so what we're gonna do is look at the distances, so there's a predicated distance from the intersection for that hazard signage. And depending on what we do, if we just do it as the vertical element to say intersection ahead, then it has to be, I think it's 112 feet from the intersection, something like that. But if we're also dealing with the horizontal element, which is the vertical curve, and we decide to put it further back, it may be in Goffstown, and if it is, we'll coordinate with Sarah as to
Right.
where that needs to be.
Right.
I think it might
And-
need to go to Highway Safety.
Okay, highway safety. But we would, and that's if Carl says, yeah, that
Oh,
that
it's
makes
on,
sense.
it's on somebody else's property, that's why. Tim?
So I know Manchester traffic's been here. Are you satisfied with what you need to know? Do you have anything you need to know from us tonight? Or are you good? You're welcome to come up and speak if you,
I was told to just take notes tonight.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Just wanna make sure you didn't leave
it's-
without having everything you need.
If it's just a warning sign, you don't need to have, there's no reason to have to go to this safety committee. If it's just a
It's not a
advisory.
sign, it's not a sign
We're-
required
I-
in ordinance.
We are not getting into whether
All
safety,
right,
tri- they
just-
need, that is somebody, another committee's.
I'm gonna suggest we continue this, because we have another hearing, and it's late.
Right, no, we have
Yeah,
a
we wanna be
conceptual, no,
judicious
that's
with
what
your
we're
time.
trying to get to, exactly when the applicant will feel comfortable coming back, because we would all like it to be one more fairly wrap-up as old business at the first half of our meeting.
What's
So,
staff's recommendation, Joanne? What's your staff come back for? April what? March what?
Well,
Which meeting? So I can make a motion to
if he's
continue.
ready, he could come back for the March 26th meeting.
I would be all for that.
I think that's what he was trying for.
Do we have room on the agenda for that night?
Yes.
You want a motion, Barbara?
Yes.
And will they have worked out the traffic? study
So
thing?
there aren't actually any traffic
There's no-
concerns, it was just a
were no
recommendation,
traffic
hey, can you put a sign in, and it's a matter of whether or not that would work.
Ready?
Yeah?
Make a motion to continue this application to March 26th of 2020.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to continue this application to March 26th. This would be public, this is notice of the continuation to the public hearing at that point in time. If a member of the public wants to continue to make a comment on this, we will have a public hearing on that date also. Is there any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, it carries. We will see you on March 26th.
Thank you for your time.
Our next item of business, and the last item of business tonight, is for map 6, lot 43. It's a conceptual plan review hearing for a proposed garden landscaping center with retail sales. Green Thumb Landscaping and Irrigation. The applicant is Adam Vermakowitz and owners Teresa Mahoney and Jay Barron. This property is 278 Mast Road. This is zoned commercial industrial flex zone. For members of the public that might be hearing this property is one of the houses that is across from the Irving gas station towards the old paper Kennedy Hill Road. Joanne?
So we had a TRC meeting on this application last week. And if you're familiar with where the Dunkin' Donuts, about 2 years ago, there was a Dunkin' Donuts that was proposed. The property is across from the Irving station. It's currently a blue, single-family home that's been vacant for a while now. And they're proposing to use the same structure and convert the property into a retail garden shop operation. They will need, well, it depends, we're not really clear yet whether they need to get approval for the second driveway, because it is existing, but the zoning officer was questioning whether they could go ahead with it since they're changing the use of the site. That is under New Hampshire DOT jurisdiction, so we need to look into that a little further. But the parcel,
Excuse me, before you leave, Nick, are you gonna turn your TV off?
Oh, sorry, I thought I got it.
TV. The parcel, they're planning to put in a gravel driveway and have a display area, and the wetlands have been shown. So they're here tonight basically to go over the proposal and see whether you have any concerns before they go
So
forward.
normally we can't get it on, now we can't get it off.
I know there's like a certain angle you have to be at to get it to read.
Try it from the back part. That's how I got it to turn on.
At least we got it to work. Just excited about that. Press and hold or just?
I think you have to hold it, yeah. No.
I can go up there and unplug the damn thing.
We've done that before.
Maybe come like more centered to the table.
You're just getting me to wander around the room now.
Yeah, we don't want you to leave.
Take your time, we got nothing else to do
I was gonna
tonight.
say, you guys don't wanna go home, right?
I wonder,
We can play with it later. Does it matter right now?
The clerk has informed me that if I text him, he'll get somebody to open the doors for me to come back, so I'm happy to stay.
So you gotta keep us here as long as you can, thanks.
I wonder if because that was.
Hey, Dave, you got the magic
All right,
touch.
okay.
You're welcome, I warmed it up for you.
Thank
All right.
you.
Okay.
All right, let's move on.
So they're basically here tonight to discuss the project and see if you have any concerns or questions before they move forward with the final engineering.
Okay. Come on down.
Thank you.
I did include comments that came up at the TRC, starting at the bottom of page 14.
Right.
And continuing on to page 15.
Good evening, members of the Goffstown Planning Board. I'm Jason Hill with TF Moran. I'm a project manager, and I'm here with Adam Vermakowitz of Green Thumb Landscaping, who is the applicant for this project. We wanted to touch base with you on at a conceptual level. I know we don't always come in at this phase, but I like to get as much feedback as possible, as early as possible, on projects that I'm working on. So this site, as you both described, it's across from the Irving Station. It's just to the west of the signal at Henry Bridge Road. So the Irving Station's here. The intersection of Henry Bridge Road is in this vicinity. This is a small residential, formerly zoned residential.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, let me interrupt. Sarah, do you have any comments on this?
She was asleep when you were
Considering that it's conceptual, not really,
No.
I'd kind of like to hear some of the issues that we brought up at your are at all addressed tonight.
All right,
Yeah.
if you want to
I'll try
stay,
to be
you
brief.
My
can.
husband's working, so.
Well, I know, but it's also, you guys have long days over there, so.
I'll try to make it as brief as possible.
No, it's not you, it's just if Sarah could leave and go home, I was gonna say go home. Okay.
So, this is the preferred design at this point. The property has it's just a single-family house in the middle with two existing curb cuts, and there's a driveway next to the house, a detached garage in this location, and there's an open field in the back of this site. There's a channel that runs through the middle, an existing, it's a ephemeral stream, which means it's a jurisdictional, it may be a jurisdictional wetland. We have to make a final determination on that. And it basically is like a flashy type channel that when you get a heavy rain, there's a hillside that comes down and through here it collects. There's a swamp that makes some natural detention, but the water generally flows into this channel and then out into Mass Road. There's a culvert under the abutting driveway. Closed drainage system in Mass Road that eventually goes to the river, Piscataqua. And so we're looking to basically, this would be a change in use with a site plan component where we'd convert the existing footprint of the building to like a retail store on the first level, and then some like a accessory office space on the second level, not really making any exterior improvements other than some minor improvements. We're not gonna propose any additions, even painting or anything of that nature at this point. And the use is really for the building, like I said, will have some retail. You can purchase maybe like hand carved, some wood carvings, benches and things of that nature. And then the rest of the property would be used for like display and sale of nursery stock, shrubs, trees, outdoor display areas, which would basically the majority of that would be in the center portion of the site, which is currently just level and it's just overgrown grasses. We would keep that same ground cover and then occupy that space with that type of a use with a portable greenhouse component. I'll hand this around. You can. I didn't have enough for everyone, but this is a local property being used in a similar manner in which we would portray to develop this.
I'll share that one.
This site. This is a rather small operation. It's a new operation, and as such, it doesn't. Our concerns are mainly related to this channel crossing, as well as really the traffic is not of a concern since this is a limited, small operation. We don't anticipate a lot of traffic. We're only proposing 10 or 11 parking spaces. We do not anticipate a big slug of traffic that would have any mitigation components or anything of that nature that would necessitate any off-site improvements. So that's the use. I would need under this condition, which is the preferred design, where we're proposing to utilize both existing curb cuts and have a one-way clockwise circulation pattern. So we'd be proposing a one-way clockwise circulation pattern utilizing the two existing curb cuts that I'm going to get confirmation from the DOT that those are legal. As far as I'm concerned as of today, I haven't heard for certain, but I'm making the assumption at this point. I have two curb cuts that are legal. Convert them to one-way, and the reason for the preference of the one-way U-shaped driveway is for both customer and Adam's use for the convenience. Alternatively, I could develop this with a hammerhead condition for a fire truck, well, for all users. I could convert the two driveways into a singular driveway with a hammerhead. However, the circulation works better due to not having to make the backing and turning around movements if I have a one-way circulation pattern that can just circulate freely without having to, back up, make these turnaround movements. And for that reason, we prefer this U-shaped design in the preservation of these two curb cuts. This design requires a conditional use permit, I believe, from the planning board for the change of use, I guess, as Nancy has, where I've gotten with Nancy, which needs to be confirmed, but my understanding is that the change in use triggers obviously the need to comply with the current regulations. This property having less than 300 feet of frontage would only be allowed a single curb cut under the current Goffstown driveway statutes, as well as the current driveway statutes require that I maintain a 200-foot separation between, so the conditional use permit to reutilize these existing driveways I'd be asking for that consideration from you, and I'd like feedback on that if at all possible tonight. It would be designed to accommodate a fire truck turning circulation pattern. So we would get that approved through your Lieutenant O'Connor.
So a change, excuse me, from Joanne, your comments, you said the applicant is proposing a horseshoe driveway. So that's not what he's proposing tonight. It's a circular driveway.
Right.
I
or
think it's the same
horseshoe.
thing, yeah.
Depends on how you look at it. So.
Okay,
It-
all right.
I think the question is, he has two existing curb cuts. There was a question that came up as to whether they both have driveway permits from the DOT.
Right. No, I understand what the issue is, Tim.
So if it was determined that there were two valid DOT driveway permits, do they still need the conditional use permit at that point?
Well, that
That's
was
the
the
issue with
question,
the
and
zoning.
Nancy is saying that
Yes.
they do because he's changing the use from residential to
commercial.
commercial. I'm kind of arguing the other way.
Jim?
Yeah, arguing in favor of the, assuming that what's required, it's one-way traffic. We're typically concerned about two-way traffic and multiple exits and entries, but this really limits the ins and outs, so it's probably more.
We would distribute them.
Yeah. Normally, we don't want a lot of them, but here it may make sense.
The DOT finds that they're existing and it's one way. I don't have any issue with that.
But I think it's really up to the DOT.
And I'll have
Because it is under their
confirmation when I come before you as part of my package, to my site plan package, I'll have that developed and submitted. So one of the things was this driveway matter. We can keep talking about it, but I think,
Yeah, we can move on.
yes, so, secondly, traffic, as I mentioned, we anticipated being a low generation. I'll submit a letter from our traffic engineer with a breakout, but I think, we were going to, not be too concerned about the low amount of peak traffic on this section of road due to just the limited nature of the use and the amount of parking spaces were provided, and Adams anticipated, operations, so,
I have a question. Do you need loading areas? Do people have to back up to somewhere to?
yeah, so then the loading would occur in this portion. You typically get I believe a box truck size truck. They don't get tractor trailers regularly at all, rarely. So we'd be accommodating a smaller truck for deliveries. So
And the customers too, when they buy stuff.
I could design, this plan does not have a dedicated loading space. However, we could plan one, potentially just widening this
Yeah, just a
driveway here.
pull-off area.
Just to have enough, an 8-foot section he just pulls off so that we're not blocking that.
But if you're
through
gonna tell me
traffic.
you want this to be one way, if there's
Yes.
a truck parked there, you gotta get through one way still. Tim?
You'll need to show some kind of a dumpster pad or something on this site plan. I don't see it on this
That was one of the
conceptual.
comments. Could you tell me what the crushed stone comment is? Because when I first looked at it, I thought it was indicating a storage area, but
Okay,
now I'm not so sure.
Yes, so we want the finish of this parking lot to be aesthetically and environmental, I guess you could say, to use, other than the immediate area around the building itself where the handicap parking is. The finish would be like a clean crushed stone, like a 3/4 inch crushed stone surface, with a gravel section beneath it for structure for the fire truck, so that there's no rutting.
So the
finish
crushed
would-
stone is the driveway?
Yeah, like a
the
natural
driveway
crushed stone
as
finish.
compared to paving?
Correct,
Not
and
a
then-
storage area? Okay.
And we'd also, the drainage would be, we're proposing at this point, although I have to test the soil, to have an infiltration trench, basically pitch the driveway to an infiltration trench that is parallel with the driveway, a 2-foot wide infiltration trench. Sarah's provided me with specifications of a similar situation in town that this has been used on. And so the runoff would then, the intent would be to drain it into the ground through this infiltration trench that's adjacent to the driveway. So the water would flow into this trench and then into the ground. And that would be our drainage system for this project, which
Okay.
would end up having to come through Sarah and the engineering departments anyways. But that's the basis of our design anyways. Soils, I would ask for a waiver. It looks like most projects require site-specific soil mapping. I don't know if I haven't flushed this out with Joanne yet, but on this project here, if a site-specific soil mapping is proposed, I'd propose to waive that and instead use the developable portion of the site. This front half is all a uniform soil group according to the data that's available. The Soil Conservation Service data has a uniform parent soil group. So your regulations say on some sites you need to have a soil scientist delineate to see if there's multiple soil groups, not just one. And that's for the purpose of drainage design. I'd rather in this project, instead of that data, because it is visually looking across this field, it's all of a consistent soil group in a level slope area. I think it's more valuable to dig a test pit in the area that we're proposing the infiltration practice, so that we're, where we're discharging the water into the ground, that we verify that we're meeting the intent of your regulations, rather than have a soil scientists map the individual soil groups, which is, it's more common in like a large development or like a subdivision when you're doing lot loading for septic.
Sarah, what do you think of that?
And I haven't discussed this with Sarah yet, so I'm not trying to put her on the
Paying any
spot.
attention? Sorry.
But just whether or not we would, if I add for soils design for the soil mapping,
Yes.
if I could use the SCS soils for the curve number calculations, for subcatchment modeling, use the SCS soil groups, because the published soil groups in this site where we're developing it is a uniform class. It's not like a divided line with 3 different groups, cutting pieces of it. It's all one group up here. So just use the published information, one soil group, and then do a test pit where we're gonna have the infiltration practice, just to verify that the soils where we're proposing to infiltrate them are accepting to infiltration. I just don't think for the
I
cost.
think you need to let that sit with Sarah for a little bit
Sure.
and then give her a call.
Yeah, that's
Because
great.
because we,
I don't need an answer
You just said.
tonight.
well, I know you
Different
need,
types versus one type, I don't
Yeah,
know.
I
So,
think it's
I
a
know-
requirement.
I think we're
Go
gonna,
ahead,
we're gonna
Laura.
rely on Sarah to tell us.
all right,
Yeah.
so I think,
No problem.
so he wants to waive the site-specific soil mapping based on the site use and the site conditions. So he's gonna have a discussion with you about what he would propose
Yeah, I can
instead.
have
I think if he does a test pit in the area where he's proposing the infiltration, we'd get a lot more information.
Right, that's what he's saying.
Okay, we'll do that
So
and
it sounds like you're on the same
I'll
page, so
confirm
you
that
just
offline, but I
need to
guess.
confirm it
Well,
offline.
it's not 10 o'clock at night, that's correct.
Okay.
And then
well-
finally, the wetland impact component, which we're verifying with the state whether or not this is an ephemeral jurisdictional area. If that's the case, we would be getting a wetland impact, minimum impact from the Conservation Commission.
Okay.
So putting in a culvert for our new driveway crossing here, and then probably replacing that culvert in that location. We'll deal with the Conservation Commission on that to get the wetland permit, but that's another thing about this project, that's a key thing, so.
Right, but you need to wait to get that determination,
And that depends on the driveway, if I get support for the U-shaped driveway,
which I think you
i.e. I
have.
think I have here, and I get it from the
Right,
state, then I would
from the
pursue with
state.
that plan and go that direction.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right,
Are you
Jim.
gonna have bulk storage or materials, just?
No, that would, like, mulch, hardscaping, no, there would be no, that's, there's an adjacent business.
Pro Landscape, so I'm gonna leave that business to them.
Okay.
Okay. Tim.
So, a couple things that you haven't mentioned that you probably know about, but if you are gonna include site lighting, you'll need to have some information about the site lighting.
Yep.
A description of the hours of operation and the days of the week, that kind of thing is nice to know so that it's approved and it doesn't come up later.
Yep.
Certainly.
And as Jim mentioned, I mentioned a brief description of the materials to be displayed in the outdoor storage areas so that you have an idea of what you want to sell and we have an idea too for an approval process.
Location of a commercial sign on this plan?
Yeah, we'll add that as part of our package. The intent is to have a similar sign to the Pro Landscape style, which is a illuminated sign conforming to the ordinance, but that would be in the front area, legally situated where we're not going to be looking for relief. Would we include the sign plan with our site plan package if we, would that have to come through the planning board route or?
You can, no, but they would like to see the location.
Okay. I mean, if we have it ready, I'll provide it, but if we don't, I'll provide the location.
I just think we need the location and then the sign ordinance.
And then
controls,
architecturally, like, I can submit an existing picture of the structure, but I mentioned that it's not gonna be dressed up at this point or modified significantly.
Okay.
So, there's really no architectural component, so to speak, at this point.
No, we put dumpster on there.
Was this where there was an easement where you would ideally put the sign?
There was a sewer easement.
Across the front, right?
Yeah, there's like a,
Yeah.
strip along the front where I think it's a 10-foot sewer easement that would, I don't know what the easement says, I haven't read the easement, but, we'll provide details on the sign location at a further point when I have good
Need your
information.
pieces put together.
Yeah.
Tim, did you have something else?
No, I was just thinking about that easement, because we required a sewer easement for where East Point Rentals is. There must be sewer easements
Yeah,
on
there
both
is.
sides of the street.
Tim, there is, it's actually like it's shown here, the 25-foot sewer easement.
Yeah.
And it's this line, basically this strip along the frontage.
Okay, that
Comes
must,
to about 5 feet before the structures.
that must, yeah, okay, that must feed across the street.
Okay.
And the rail trail does not impact, there's no rail trail on this site. I think it must be behind the
No,
Irving.
it's behind the gas
Behind the
station.
Irving.
Other than that, it's a good project. It's fairly straightforward, although every project has its,
Right.
stuff.
Yeah, never say that.
Oh, Joe
So I
Biden
appreciate all your
did
feedback
remove-
on this, and I think it's,
All right. Okay. All right, anything else from board members? Anything, other questions for us? Is there gonna be any other landscaping company in town, or is it all gonna be one now?
It's gonna be me.
Is it really? Because I kept looking at it going, this is the wrong name. This is the wrong name. All right.
So we're
Okay.
not continuing this is just conceptual
This was a
tonight.
conceptual,
Yep,
so
thank you. We'll
they've
be
got,
back.
all right,
appreciate all your
all set?
feedback.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right, board members, you have been very patient.
Good night, Sarah.
But we
Good night,
never.
Sarah.
Good night, Sarah.
Actually, I have one more statement for off.
Well, let's get her right away.
No, because, no, Joanne, what do you have?
I have the driveway on Tyrrell Hill Road.
Okay.
Joanne needs to pass something
update,
out.
But there's a question as to how to address it. This is an email from Nancy.
Good night.
Good night.
I just want to know about this too, so I'm curious about this.
We have just got all sorts of things we want to know about
Yeah.
here tonight, huh?
Honestly, it does help
Get yourself-
to just hear it, because then when we get called in for our opinion, it's helpful to just know what's going on.
Okay.
So what happened was Nancy looked at some photos and thought that the driveway was never removed. However, it was removed.
The pavement was
The
removed.
pavement was removed. And she spoke with Ara Tamzarian, who was the person who owned the property at the time. And he said that when they removed the pavement, under the pavement was the knit pack that's currently there. I'm just telling you what he said.
They
So-
added knit pack to replace the pavement so that it's a flush surface. I went by and looked at it.
So Nancy thought, rather than deal with the new property owner of the home, that it would be better to deal with Mr. Tamzarian, because he's the one that was involved with this, not the new people. And that they would only be copied on the letter of notice of violation. So she's asking the board for some input on their opinion as to how to handle this. She's suggesting that, well, she also said that she reviewed the minutes and there was nothing to say how the actual
Abandonment.
would look like afterwards. So she's basically asking, would it be okay to deal with Mr. Tamzarian rather than the new property owner? And that, what did you have in mind as far as abandoning the property? Because if they continue to use that, they're actually now going onto his property. Because if you remember when this first started,
He owned
the
both.
board asked if he would provide an easement. And he said, rather than have to do that, let's just rip it out. And that was his answer.
Is that in the minutes?
I don't know, I haven't read the minutes, but I know that's what he said. I'm sure it's on
I
the video.
remember it.
All right, Tim.
So can you review the conditions of approval and see what the conditions of approval actually stated regarding the abandonment of that driveway?
Yeah, I looked at them just the other day, and I can't say off the top of my head exactly, but I think it just said abandon the use. I don't think it gave specific instructions as to how to do that.
Well, you can only give so many instructions to people. When the driveway was deemed not part of the subdivision, the lot line adjustment's what it actually was.
Yeah.
We told the applicant that we did not want that driveway to be in service anymore. And all they did was remove the pavement to get the plan signed to which was like that for a while, and then the new owners filled the pavement back in with nit pack to make it a smooth surface to drive in and out.
Have the new owners been told it's not a permitted access?
No, she hasn't contacted the new owners. She said that if she deals with Tamzarian, she would copy them on
Okay,
the
but
letter.
dealing with Tamzarian is not going to get us anywhere because he doesn't own the property that's using the
He owns-
unauthorized driveway.
He owns the driveway, though, that it starts on. He
Well,
still
he
owns that
owns a
acre.
portion of the driveway, so it would appear to me that, but that's not our concern. If he's not complaining about that use, then that's not our concern. Our issue is the lot that the lot of 323 has got a driveway that it's using that it's not authorized to use on that lot.
But it's both driveways. Both people have a problem because from what I understand is the driveway actually starts on Tanzarian's
It
property.
does?
Right? And then goes on to the other property, so both homeowners should be addressed on this situation.
And-
Tanzarian by saying, you got an illegal driveway, and then the other people because you got an illegal driveway.
Well, then we asked DPW about it, and DPW never issued a permit for that second driveway, as I remember. Eric
Right, but
Gustafson stated.
323 has a driveway besides this, right?
Right, they have their own driveway.
So there are two different issues.
Right.
323 has a permitted, valid driveway, and their use of the area that is NITPAC, or whatever it is, for access to the site off of Terrell Hill Road is not authorized. They need to cease and desist. And further, they should be aware that the NITPAC area isn't on their property to begin with. And then
It's half
Tam
and
is-
half, Barbara.
And then the owner of the other lot needs to be notified that there are no permits on record for access of any lot from his lot.
That's right.
As a matter of fact, we.
Both people need to be
And then they
addressed.
each should be CC'd. I don't even know that they should be CC'd. It's each person's private business, and if they figure it out, let them figure it out.
What is the remedy that we're expecting, that they actually?
Cease use. Cease use and remove the NITPAC.
Remove the nitback and regrade?
Loam it and put it back to natural. See, the problem was the applicant, when Tamzarian was here, it was inconvenient to walk to the front door from the lower driveway, so therefore they wanted to retain the use of the driveway that was on the high side of the property, because it was convenient to pull your cars in and carry the groceries
Right,
up.
right.
Well, we didn't build the house with the driveway on the bottom, so it's their responsibility to deal with their own issue on their own lot legally.
Right.
We even suggested that they extend the driveway from the lower driveway up into the front yard, which they don't want to do that because it was going to cost them too much money, as I remember.
So, I mean, there's two separate lots, two separate owners, two separate
So
issues.
they both should receive the same letter.
Yes.
Essentially, yeah.
But I just want to be clear, what we're expecting is to remove. and-
323 is the
and
cease and desist of the use of the unauthorized driveway, which needs to be removed and put back to grade.
Now, a remedy could be they could apply for a conditional use permit to put a new driveway on their own side of the property line to access that parking
Yeah, but
area,
that's not
which
for
the board
purposes
could
of the
consider.
letter.
The board could consider that as a remedy.
But that's.
That's a whole different
That's a
subject.
That's
Different
another,
subject.
but rather than say, you can't have it anymore, here's a remedy, go through channels and do it quick.
I can't, we can't get notice of violation letters out. I can't get into dealing with potential remedies in them. Let's keep it to what it's supposed to be, and then
Or maybe you could
hopefully
just-
they'll pick up the phone and they'll probably call planning and say, there are options, but this happened before you bought the property, and we're very sorry, but
It was dealt with.
it was dealt with, and unfortunately, something got lost in the translation to the time you purchased the property. But I think it needs to go to both of them, and it's unauthorized use, cease and desist.
Okay.
All right. Anything else, Joanne?
I thought,
Wasn't there,
Sarah, do you have
wasn't there
something?
another issue with the?
Afterwards.
Nope, she's telling me nothing. So, Peter, do you have something?
well, were we gonna talk a little more about the well situation? On what we recommend or what we thought?
For the,
Gentle slopes with that surface well?
I thought we sort of had a discussion
I
that
thought
said
we were
we
going
would
to let
need
them
to.
come back with their professional opinions on how much the groundwater recharge.
I thought that's what they already did.
No, I thought, we don't have the ability to be asking people to do that.
Exactly, that's just what I wanted to know.
I agree. But I wanted to be on the record that that was a concern from the neighbor, and it's up to them to.
That's a
Because then if
private
it becomes
issue.
a civil matter, then
Right.
I
and-
just
all right, we don't need to
want that.
revisit it. Jim defined that our ability to deal with this issue is to make sure that the calculations are done properly and that the recharging and the off-site runoff is in accordance with our regulations. And it sounds like this is a significantly better plan for the abutters concern than the original plan. Tim?
So I have a statement to make, and I don't want discussion on it. We have these.
Well.
We have these new, large-scale apartments that are planned for the Mill area, 5-story apartments. I watched the news the other night, and it was a 4 or 5-story building in Ossipee that had no fire escapes on it, and people jumping out the windows. Do we have anything in our regulations that requires fire escapes for people in 5-story buildings in our town?
We have numerous building codes, and the fire department is in Concord every year requesting that our building codes be updated, so I am sure that they are taking care of that.
Well, I just am concerned that we would approve a 5-story building without a discussion item.
All right.
Second.
Barbara?
Oh.
I have the complaints that I received down on Mass Road in Bernardville.
All right, I'm sorry, you're going to have to refresh my memory, because at 10:15 I don't have much.
The construction equipment that's being parked on the property that has no site plan.
114, 114A.
Correct.
Oh, the,
Yeah, what's the status of that?
Oh,
The
is
building?
that the house with the antique?
yeah, that.
No, it's the one right on the
Old
corner. It
Century
used-
21
The
property.
Century 20, yeah.
It's right on the corner. It's the blue, I think it's blue, isn't it, or green? Right on the corner. We had a site plan came in that Ray Shea, I think, did, that they never paved, never got signed.
You mean that Green Ranch?
No, the one right on the
Century
corner.
21 office.
21, sales
Oh,
office.
okay.
What's the status of that?
The Century 21?
There was supposed to be a violation letter that went out on that because they've never had a signed site plan. He's operating the
Heichel
repair.
property?
And now there's
building.
construction equipment being operated.
back.
The dump truck.
Yeah, I've seen it.
More than that.
Has anything gone
Bunch
out
of
on
them
that
in the
property?
back.
Yeah, so initially, a letter went out to the owner and.
Registered first.
Registered, certified letter. And there was no response, and then I gave her your suggestion, and another letter was sent out. This was sometime in February. And I think the choices were, contact us within 5 days of receipt of the letter. She was suggesting that he go to the TRC so that we can find out exactly what's going on over there. And I haven't heard anything since.
All right, so we want to follow up on that because the letters finally went out in February. Great. Okay, Tim.
Well, depending upon the amount of trucks that are parked there, we could be up against the zoning decision that was made for that Tanager Road property where the guy parks his truck there, his tractor trailer next to his house every day, and zoning approved that. Because he's not operating a business.
No, this doesn't have anything to do with this. It's not dissimilar.
It's 90% sure that there's a business going on in the garage.
Well, that's not those dump trucks. I think the guy lives there, just parks his dump truck there, if that's what you're speaking about.
But there's all kinds of
Drives it home at
vehicles
night and
parked
drives it out to work in
in
the
the
daytime.
back behind the garage, and there's no site
That's a
plan
Hooksett
approval.
company, that truck.
The site plan approval was only a conditional approval, and the conditions were never met, so it
Right, it never got
expired.
signed, it never expired.
Let's get a little bit of ready fire aim to this.
Right,
Good point.
all right.
You got that motion still there, Jim?
There was a motion to adjourn, it was seconded, right?
All
Yes,
those
it
in
was.
favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, it carries. All right.
Sure.
All right, yeah, so we're adjourned.
Wait till the TV's
And I
on.
will, and I